This is Hannibal here from thehannibaltv.com, and today is my special guest. I have a wrestler slash actor who I've been trying to track down for a while. His real name is Jeffrey Beltzner. He's been the star of many of the Nuke Em High series of films. He's been in a Jean-Claude Van Damme film. He was also known as the wrestler Brick Bronski, most notable for his time in Stampede Wrestling, but he wrestled in other territories as well. So we'll get into that. And he's also in the Masked Mutilator film, which you can see the poster for it right beside him. How are you doing today, sir?
Good to me, but I'll quote Jesse the Body Ventura at 1988's TV taping when I said to him after talking to him, former Navy SEAL, I said, "Thank you for talking with me, sir." He goes, "Don't call me sir. I'm enlisted just like you."
I'll have to ask you about that, your time in WWE, because unfortunately, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but your wrestling career is best known for your real altercation you had with Brian Pillman. That kind of overshadowed everything else.
Yeah, did you want to jump to that right away?
No, we could get let's just start it off because I watched the clip montage that you sent me, and you were a wrestling fan all of your life, so maybe you could get into how you started becoming interested in professional wrestling.
Here's the thing, in the 70s, I remember going into Nick's hot dog shop with my dad on a Saturday because he fixed washing machines for a living in his own business. We'd go in there and the TV was above the cooler for the sodas. And they'd have what I first saw of the WWF early on. And they'd have the X on the screen with the Wolfman and this, that, and the other. And we remember watching Dean Ho and Tony Garea as the tag team champions, the Valiant brothers, Handsome Jim and Brother Luscious John, as Vince McMahon Jr. called them. And to me, yeah, there was a Flyers run here outside of Philadelphia. There was a Steelers run of football, and they had the Yankees run. But none of the sports interested me like professional wrestling. There was no Saturday that I didn't go by. Heck, I'd go up at midnight to get the antenna to tune in to the wrestling. IWA and WOR carried it out of New York, which was a championship wrestling from that you'd see ahead of time. Channel 48 out of Philadelphia, Burlington, I don't know that they're around anymore, would show Georgia championship wrestling. Couldn't get enough of wrestling. Got the wrestling magazines and such. Well, we never, in Allentown growing up with my dad, was in the Coast Guard in World War II. We never went to movies. We never went to the bowling alley, but he took us to see professional wrestling, the TV tapings at the Agricultural Hall in Allentown. It was every 3 weeks on a Tuesday, and it would be 8, sometimes to 11. They'd get 3 hours in. You paid $3, and you'd go and watch the wrestling because my dad liked professional wrestling. And he would drop me and my brother off. He'd either stay with us, and then he couldn't stand the smoke, the cigarette smoke inside. So as we got a couple years older, 8th, 9th grade, he'd just drop us off and come back and pick us up. But that's where I walked through the first time. We were a little late. It was summer, and it was Superstar. It was Swede Hansen against Charlie Brown. And I walked in and kind of had an idea that was like, hey, nobody's really killing each other. But when I saw this match, I just looked, my jaw dropped. I was like, oh my God, this is bad. And you came to get to know it, and they were smart enough to put the dark match, because it was all squash matches. They'd put the dark match on at the end to make people stay. And then you'd have how many times I've seen the Iron Sheik wrestle Bob Backlund, and the punches were missing by this much. And everybody saw it, but there was such a frenzy to the comeback, you just forgot about it. Talk about suspension of disbelief. But then I was hooked. As it jumped ahead, I followed it straight on through 10th grade. There's a Danny Davis story with Dominic DeNucci. You can ask that later, but it was kind of funny because if it was wintertime, you'd wander down because people wouldn't come for the prepaid seats. And when they didn't show up, you'd wander from the bleachers down in the front. And I'd be second, third row, just looking to see on Saturday how big I looked on the camera. We're talking 9th, 10th grade when you get into weight training and stuff. And I'll never forget, I was sitting next to, it turns out to be, well, this guy was sitting there with a nice button-down shirt, sunglasses, and I'm thinking, this guy's not a typical wrestling participant here that comes to this show. And people are looking over at me. I'm like, why are you looking at me? Here they're looking at the guy next to me. It was Tony Garea coming in to confront Larry Zbyszko after he had attacked Bruno Sammartino after the exhibition match and hit him over the head. And boy, there was blood all over the ring. But it was Tony Garea next to me. How ironic. He turned out to be one of my 2 road agents at the WWF. It was George Animal Steel and Tony Garea. And that was a story from Ag Hall. But the Danny Davis thing was priceless because you sort of, you know, you got into the system there. So there was a woman that always wore the same outfit, looked like a reject of Hollywood Freddie Blassie's outfits, but it had Pat Patterson on the back. And she was screaming that Pat Patterson was getting beat up in the ring and something. And she's yelling, stop the match, stop the match. So I just jumped along with it. And I'm looking altogether different than she did. I'm a 10th grade, 9th, 10th grader. And I'm yelling, stop the match. And I'm going along and the crowd's looking at this going, hey, everybody wants to stop the match. Well, then every 3 weeks you'd go there after months and months and years. The spectators kind of get to know each other. And what ended up happening is the job or jabroni, I hate using that expression, the guy you know where's going to lose comes walking out and I'd yell, stop the match. And the crowd would laugh. Well, it got to the point where a referee would walk out, who always walked out first. And I'd say, stop the match, just seeing the referee, stop the match. Jumping ahead, we'll pull a little Tarantino on you. There was an incident where Vince McMahon would come out and they would talk where the audience couldn't hear it, but was for the setup before the matches start on a TV. And he's on there and he didn't even start talking. And some ass yelled, cut the shit, McMahon. Years later, the Tarantino part of this is I'm in the dressing room at the TV taping somewhere in '89. It's Pat Patterson, Vince McMahon, and myself. And I said, look, Mr. McMahon, I called him Mr. McMahon way before he was Mr. McMahon. But, oh, please, Jeff, call me Vince, call me Vince. And I said to him, look, I'm a mark for this business because I'd be showing up at TV tapings and not even being used. And I had already an offer to go to Japan. Shohei Baba, by the way. Anyway, I said to him, Mr. McMahon, do you remember at Ag Hall when you would come out in that yellow jacket and you're talking into the mic and some ass yelled, cut the shit, McMahon. The whole audience laughed and so did you. Do you remember that? He goes, yes, I do, Jeff. I go, Mr. McMahon, I was that ass. He laughed accordingly. You knew he had a good sense of humor. But the Danny Davis story, because there's a Tarantino to that too, because he was Andre the Giant's valet in a real sense, made sure that Andre got wherever he needed to go in the airplane, because I was the opening match with Barry Horowitz, and what's his name was Big John Studd against Andre as a babyface was the main event. So when people say, did you ever meet Andre the Giant? Shit, I showered with him every night. But the key is Danny Davis made a crack one time to me, saying, because I got motion sickness very easy, and they upgraded me for whatever reason. I was in first class with Andre and Danny Davis, and when I woke up, I just had to stay asleep because I get motion sickness. And Danny Davis quips, Quips, quips. Yeah, how about the new guy? He gets upgraded to first class and he sleeps through it. I didn't have the nerve to tell him, hey, back at Ag Hall, as a 10th grader, I kept rousting him as a referee when he came out. I'd say, Danny Davis, I'm going to break your back. They used to do this. I'm going to break your back. At first, he started laughing. And then at one point, Dominic DeNucci came out, and Dominic's leaning over the rope, and he's trying to taunt me with Dominic looking at me. I didn't break the act up from my end to say, here, I says, not you, Dominic, not you, but that guy next to you, Danny Davis, I'm going to break his back. I'm going to break his back like I'm a lunatic. Today, they'd call the police on you. Dominic didn't move it any further, but after that, I kept yelling at Danny Davis, I'm going to break your back. He never pursued it, never called the police. He never found out that I'm not really crazy. I was working him. Didn't have the chance to tell him anything after that. So I let his joke go about, hey, how about the new guy? He falls asleep in first class. That's the whole incident at the Ag Hall. Loved it. I broke away from it from a year when I graduated from high school. But the thing is, they all worked out at the Olympic Fitness Center, which no longer exists. It's literally 2 blocks from the Agricultural Hall. That's why a lot of the wrestlers were settled there. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson went to Freedom High School because his dad settled there. Got the privilege of working out with Rocky Johnson. Don Morocco didn't work out with Paul Orndorff, but he was at the gym. The Samoans were at the gym. What I found striking to me at that time, when Don Morocco comes and says, I'd like to work in with you, and we're doing long rows, which I had a good back and I was strong. Is this a bodybuilding gym, a powerlifting? I says, well, I powerlifted in high school. This is more of a bodybuilding gym. We got along, we worked out, the weights were equitable. But what I found was striking is you'd get on the scale, which was on the way downstairs to the showers. And what happened was you'd see the wrestlers, everybody, big guys, all wanted to weigh themselves. How much weight am I gaining? And I remember it was Paul Orndorff. It either was 228 or 238, but I listened to what they advertised him on the program. The muscular guys were at least 20 to 30 pounds more. And then you kind of wondered how much Andre the Giant, One Man Gang, or Andre the Giant really weighed, because it was uncanny how it was 20 to 30 pounds to the pound that they would exaggerate their weight. But that's where I looked at it and I thought, well, geez, I think I can do this. And that's where we started to pursue trying to get into professional wrestling. There's an Eddie Gilbert and Curt Hennig story from the same gym, but I don't know if you want to hear that.
The fans of this channel really enjoy the Curt Hennig story, so why not?
Okay, here's the deal. We're in the shower downstairs. Back in the day, everything was regional. So you could go somewhere. Now, this is Larry the Axe Hennig's son. And he would come in and there was this muscular short guy, quick draw, Rick McGraw. There was Eddie Gilbert and Curt Hennig that come to mind. They were what they called tweeners. You knew they were all
dead. They're all dead too now, unfortunately.
Isn't that unfortunate? Yes. But the key is they were tweeners. They would come in and you knew they were going to lose, but they'd at least have a comeback spot. They'd at least have their third act babyface comeback. You knew you got a little thrill, even though you're going to lose. Well, this is in that year that I wasn't following it that close. So I'm in the shower downstairs at the Olympic Fitness Center, and I didn't know him at first. I'm looking at Curt Hennig, and we're in the shower, it's just the three of us, Eddie Gilbert, Curt Hennig, and myself. And I'm looking, and he was kind of bashful. He may became Mr. Perfect and had a great promo and all that. But at this time in 83, maybe, I'm looking at him, and it was sincere. I'm like, I know you from somewhere. And I'm just as big as him at this point. I think, but I don't see you at the gym all the time. I know you from somewhere. And shorter Eddie Gilbert comes up, and he goes, I think you're right. I think I know him too. And I look and I'm like, you're Eddie Gilbert and you're Curt Hennig. I know that you are. Had a nice little chat, but I didn't recognize him at first. That was one of the experiences at the Olympic Fitness Center, literally walking distance from the Ag Hall where they wrestled every 3 weeks. And every Wednesday, 3 weeks was Hamburg. The championship wrestling was shown at 5 o'clock on a Saturday, PHL out of 17, Philadelphia. And the other one was 29 at 1 o'clock, which was a Hamburg All-Star show. We had Gary Michael Capetta on one side, but we had Joe McHugh every 3 weeks. And that's where I literally was there to see Hulk Hogan's debut. The guy has a lot of back hair and front hair that was shaved out as a clover leaf on front and back. And nobody knows how much money he spent. It's good he won the case and everything, because he spent a lot of money on whatever they call that, defoliating or razor blades and stuff. But yeah, I was there for that, and Bruno, and the first Piper's Pit with the Jimmy Snuka thing at the angle there. But yeah, that was a great experience. So again, in real estate, location, location, location. If I wasn't there, I don't know how I would have pursued it any further, but I can say this. Nobody, and I want to keep everything positive on this interview, nobody helped us from Allentown. We went to a show at the, it wasn't Ag Hall, but in the fairgrounds. It was an outdoor show. It was an NWA. I don't know if it was Jim Crockett, but it was NWA. We saw Abdullah the Butcher against Dusty Rhodes, Superstar Billy Graham with the karate gimmick. We were really there to break into the business. The local promoter said, well, you can, get a hold of Gene Anderson down in Charlotte. Maybe they'll take you down there, beat you up a little bit. Sorry, Tito Santana, your daughter's getting a big push. But it wasn't to detract us from like helping us. It was just like, oh, there's no way I can do anything when we go to a spot show at Allentown. What we did was we ended up sending out a couple pictures, and it ended up the one person that helped us. We ended up with a bunch of addresses, wrestling schools sent back here. We need your $3,000. We sent out, and it was Che N. Lowe, editor of Wrestling Eye. You think Aptors mags are gone. This guy, I don't know, Wrestling Eye, Wrestling Digest, something like that. And he sent out what would be considered a facsimile today. There was no fax machines to my knowledge then. He sent us a copy of the letter we sent and the letter he sent back in the mail that he sent to Brad Rangens. Brad Rangens running the Verne Gagne AWA school, and the guy in Jersey, the pretty Joe McHugh, the pretty boy, Larry Sharp. Well, we went because they both called us, not just sent letters back. We flew out, first time I was on a plane, to Minnesota, met with Brad Rangens, went through the whole tryout. It was just with him and Scott Ledoux. We went through the whole thing in the ring, and then Scott Ledoux takes us out for a run in this beautiful Minneapolis summer sun. Ledoux comes back, may he rest in peace, and says to Brad, oh, these guys, I was running backwards and outrunning them. He goes, yeah, but Scott, I ran them through the ringer before you took them out running. Well, he invited us out, explained the deal, everything we should do, and so forth. Well, it ended up, we did drive down to see, because he called Larry Sharp, and Larry Sharp said, I said, well, Brad's offering us something to stay up here. He goes, well, he's in an airplane hangar. He says, well, you could take a cot over here. There's some showers in the back. Well, it was too far of a drive to South Jersey. And come on, you got Larry Sharp versus Brad Rangens, an Olympic champion in his house. He's got a picture shaking Jimmy Carter's hand hanging in his picture because he would have won the Pan Am Games and the Greco-Roman Olympics. He placed high in 76, but they boycotted that year. Hence the picture of him with Jimmy Carter, President Carter, on the picture in the kitchen. So we got to stay with him and go through the wrestling school. That was 1986. That's where we broke in. At that point, when we get there, he had a universal gym and a bench press. There's another story where Leon White, may he rest in peace, would come in there, do the bench press for free while the camp's going on. He put the hat down, and there was a guy there who brought a dog, a Rottweiler, and the dog peed on Leon White's hat. And I'm looking at this big guy that played with the LA Rams and from Colorado, went on to be Vader. And I'm thinking, he's here for cheap. But boy, I think what money he saved on the gym membership would have to be paid to clean the hat. But anyway, we say to Brad, look, we can't work out here. This is not enough of a gym. No offense, but we need a weight trained gym. He goes, well, there's a gym down the street. He's in Hamel. He's in Hamel. This was Plymouth, literally around the corner. And this place called The Gym was owned by 4 people. He told us it's ranked number 1 in the country by the AAU for the best gym in the country. I mean, it was elaborate. 88 Stairmasters, had a separate weight training facility where the chalk and powder was allowed. You couldn't go in the area unless you met the requirements, 500-pound bench press, Mr. this, Mr. that, and so forth. Well, we went there, and Brad said to us, he goes, well, all the wrestlers train there for free, but 2 of the 4 owners are expecting you. We're like, what do you mean? Well, we found out at that point that Mike Hegstrom, Joe Laurinaitis, the Road Warriors, are not from Chicago, monsters. They may be monsters of the Midway, but they're not from Chicago. They're from Minneapolis. Backstory, Joe Laurinaitis was 12 years old when his dad got transferred from Philadelphia, so he's actually a Pennsylvania native. Mike Hegstrom is there. Well, they had seen pictures of us ahead of time, and Brad Rangens said, they are looking forward to meeting you. That's where, when we went to the gym, yes, it's right around the corner, and Hawk, by chance, happened to do a backdrop in Japan. Rengens happened to catch the thing on videotape in this dark match because he bought a camera there, a video camera. It was cheap. He's looking through the curtain with it, and Hawk comes back early. He's in this walking cast, and he comes to us at the gym. There's a big overlook from the food juice area. Looks over. He's got no face paint on, obviously. He's got bandanas they wear over the crazy haircuts. And he looks down at me. I see him. And he smiles. I smile. I give him a thumbs up. He comes down. I'm not supposed to repeat. He says, "Did you guys sign with Verne Gagne?" "No, don't. He's up." And they left it go at that. Well, we left the gym early. Knobs, Sags and Knobs and Nasty Boys were at the wrestling camp the year before. They were there the camp before. They went through the camp in the summer. We would have been in the same camp, except the business partner had the tag team partner had to finish his last degree in college. Didn't matter anyway, because he took philosophy and theology. It wasn't good enough of the path. I said, "Look, I can't wait. We got to go." We go, and here Knobs held the door open because we're only there a couple days, and we leave. Off camera, Annabelle, I'll tell you the rest of the Road Warrior Hawk story in the car. But nonetheless, we come back, or Animal ends up coming back, says to us, "Did you sign with Verne Gagne?" We said no. He said, because he was the businessman of the two, may they both rest in peace, but he was the businessman of the two. How ironic that Sags was the businessman of the two between Sags and Knobs and Nasty Boys. And they grew up in the area here, literally rival high schools. Brian Yandrizovitz and Jerome Saganovich, Knobs and Sags accordingly. Point is, Animal says, "Don't sign with Verne Gagne. We want you to meet Dusty Rhodes, the booker for the NWA." In the meantime, and I don't know if you heard all this of what was sent over, we're finishing up the school. We got there 2 weeks late. We left 2 weeks early. I will say, when they talk about kayfabe and keeping things a secret, when we went through this camp, they did not tell you that this was nothing like that. He wrote out a high spot at the end, which was your graduation. If you can do the leapfrog, hip toss, drop down, blah, 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 here's what you need to know. But he would tell everybody, Brad told us this isn't how it is in the ring. This is just practice. But when we left, we got there 2 weeks late. We left 2 weeks early. But what Brad Rengen said, which is an apropos analogy to the business when people talk about, well, isn't all that fake? And that. He had a lawyer that asked him, isn't wrestling fake? Brad Rengens gave us this anecdotal analogy before we left the school. He said, he asked the lawyer, when you guys get in front of the courtroom and you argue your case in front of everybody, but all of a sudden you two attorneys go back chambers with the judge and you work everything out. How fake is that? The lawyer said to Brad, you make an interesting case. So we leave knowing, and before we left, we were at this bar. Boy, they should take advantage of this name. It was called In Cahoots in Hamel on the way to the Plymouth, the gym. Well, we're there with Barry Darsow. Hadn't met him before, a Minneapolis native. Tandem deadlift record with Wayne Bloom. Strong guy. Went on to do all the other stuff, Repo Man, Smash, blah, blah, blah. Well, he's sitting there with Brad. We're at In Cahoots. I always kid and say, Knobs, why, he was French kissing the midget, the male midget. Well, they were buddy and chumming. They weren't French kissing. So sorry, Brian, it wasn't as bad as I portrayed. I could have made it worse, but you didn't French kiss, but you were kissing. The point is, we're sitting there. He's having a good time. Brad Rengen's wife-to-be is sitting on his lap, and Crusher Darsow says, Brad, and they're drinking Grain Belt beer, which was Miller, but a localized brand. Same label, but generic. And he sat there and he said, Brad tells me you got a lot of talent. you really shouldn't go to Charlotte right away. You should go to Don Owen in Portland or Stu Hart in Calgary, make a name for yourself, and then go back there. They could eat you up in Charlotte because you don't have enough in-ring experience or business regarding the entire business. And I looked at Brad because he was like my mother. He never gave advice. You knew that if he was talking about something, then it was important. And all I remember is looking at Brad and him nodding affirmatively to Mr. Darsow's comments. But, you know, hey, what do you want us to do? We're from Allentown, PA. You want us to drive? We're already halfway across the country. You want us to go all the way to Don Owen in Portland or Stu Hart in Calgary when you got the top, arguably the top tag team in the business wants you to go to Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, we're going to have to listen to them. I didn't say that to him at the time, but that's what we did. And that's where we ended up going back, stayed in contact with Joe Lar and Road Warrior Animal. And we ended up, because we had been going to the Civic Center in Philadelphia, not for McMahon's shows at the Spectrum, but we went to the Civic Center. We enjoyed the shows as fans. John Groff would take us there as a Philadelphia native. He was from Allentown, but he had a place down in Philly. He would go there. I'll tell you the Don Kernodle story another day. But the point is, we'd go there. We saw Magnum TA against Nikita Koloff, which was no offense to either of them. The thing was to go to see Flair. Flair had the match at the end of the show. And anyway, one thing led to another. We were told to go down there to meet backstage with Dusty Rhodes. There was a guy sitting there, and that'll be a quiz for later, because he's one of, I won't call him your competitor because I consider you at the top of your game. But he's sitting there, and he was a manager. And he's sitting there, and it was at the time the Philadelphia Inquirer had found this guy that was like, had that torture chamber in his basement. It was, Philadelphia is Philadelphia. It's just what they say about it is true.
Yeah, I agree with you on Philadelphia, by the way, for all of you Philadelphia fans watching.
So what I'm saying is he's sitting there. He goes, oh my, now if I give his accent away, that's going to give away my whole damn lead up to, if you remember the person, what was it? Because you're a broadcaster. Do you remember the guy? He'd be Paul Harvey. He'd do a thing early in the day on talk radio, and then he'd do at the end the rest of the story. Well, here's my variation of the rest of the story. This guy is sitting there, and as soon as I do his accent, you're going to know who he is, but don't guess right away. So he's looking at this. He goes, leave it to Philadelphia's newspaper to put a full blueprint in the newspaper. This is backstage. Leave it to Philadelphia to put the whole damn blueprints for a torture chamber in the newspaper so you can all build your own torture chamber. And I thought, okay, you're making fun of Philly, and it was stupid on the Philadelphia news.
All right, we know it's Cornette now.
Oh, for goodness sake. My next Cornette story, you ruined the thing, but here I'm going to close on this because I have information. I have something you need to know. So we're down at a promo in Charlotte, or he's doing promos. We're at the TV thing. Why is it AWA, NWA? Hell, they had these damn long trailers. You know, like mobile homes was their offices from Wayzata Boulevard down here. I'm jumping ahead in a story timeline here. But here he is, and he's doing his promo. I'm standing. I'm the only person other than the cameraman, Cornette, and this guy comes across while Cornette's doing his interview, and Dusty Rhodes comes and moons him. I mean, he might as well have spread his ass cheeks to embellish the story. Doesn't matter. Cornette, because he's trying to flub him up. And Cornette goes, oh my God, eyes are upon me right now. There are eyes. He's equating Dusty Rhodes' ass to his face as I'm watching this. And he goes, there are eyes upon me. But to save his job, he goes, I know, it's I don't know whose eyes are. Oh, it's my mama's eyes. It's my mama's eyes. I watched the damn promo on TV. There was no other take. He worked it into the angle and went from there. I thought that was pretty clever. I don't want to get into much more of the podcast stuff. Didn't you indirectly call him a cuckold? Now, that's a question that's rhetorical, but I know there's some stuff going on with all this, but I have to say this, and this is, he can run with it, whatever you want to do. I've watched, because remember, I never went to a base. I never went bowling, went to a movie theater, but damn it, I watched TV. And there was a comment he made. If somebody jumps on this or not, I know what I'm saying to be true. He's one of the greatest aficionados. I mean, Scott Levy's pretty good. The Raven guy, pretty good. Know him as far as historical facts. But when somebody comes on and says, explaining how great Hogan is, okay, I met the guy, I can tell you about him later. But the point is, as far as the break into the industry, I remember vividly, I saw Rocky III in the movie theater. I knew as a wrestling fan that, as Brad Rengen said, when he left, we're not talking about the clover leaf and the unshaved back as a heel. And he already faced Andre at Shea Stadium. I'm talking about Brad Rengen saying when he was headlining against Nick Bockwinkel in Minnesota, he was, quote Brad Rengen's, hotter than pancakes. Verne wouldn't put the belt on him. He didn't have enough experience. That made him jump. Well, as the story goes, they're saying, oh, well, you know, Hogan was on the Tonight Show because of Rocky III. Yeah, he was on the Tonight Show from Rocky III. Mr. T went on to the A-Team. I met Mr. T 5 years ago at, I'm not going to plug Chase Bank, but that's the bank in Sherman Oaks. There's none in Pennsylvania. And I wanted to say thank you, Mr. T, to help propel the professional wrestling industry to the next level with WrestleMania 1. He was so thankful. Oh, how is it? I got to know. Oh, thank you, thank you. He goes, Hogan was good to work with. Piper was good to work with. He insisted on having a picture taken with me. Yeah, I had the camera. Yeah, get a picture. Tell him the bank, because they knew him there. He was a regular. He lived in Sherman Oaks or nearby. Brings the person over. Take a picture. Get another one. Get another one for safety. We get the picture. We're done with everything. He gives me a keychain, autographed. I didn't ask for it. It has plug. I pity the fool. I do this. I do that. You press buttons on this thing. It's in the case. He autographs it. Okay, we're done. We're in the checkout line. And he already told me, he goes, I pray every day. I have my list. I pray, I pray, I pray. So I look at him, and he's in line now waiting to go to the tellers. I says, you know, one thing that, and we're done. Got the hug, got the pictures. And I said to him, I says, Isaiah 41:10, fear not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. Yea, I will strengthen thee. Yea, I will help thee. I will uphold thee with the righteousness of my right hand. And I'm halfway to the monitor I'm talking to you on. He goes, oh my God. He goes, I don't know the scriptures like you. He goes, but my church says you can't doubt them. I know too much about them. And he goes on. He gives me a big hug. We go through. May I disclose that he was cashing something for $40,000 or depositing it? I had my small check there, and it's so loud in the bank. I'm not gossiping. He didn't care. And as he looks over, he goes, oh my God, I want to tell you right now, this person right here is my new best friend. I don't want to get into Dusty Rhodes because he's not Mr. T. This is my best friend, my new best friend. Oh my God, I bet him today, blah, blah, blah. He comes over, he comes now halfway to me and gives me a second hug and says, he invites me to the church and Now, the end of the story. When I hear somebody say to me that Mr. T was nobody and that he rode on, and I'm paraphrasing here regarding Mr. T, but he repeated the story that I already knew. Because as a kid watching nothing but television, couldn't go to movies, never went bowling, only went to wrestling every 3 weeks. The bottom line is Mr. T won an ABC show, I believe. It was a one-time only, World's Toughest Bouncer. Went through some things, dwarf tossing. Can't call them midgets, not the word. Little people tossing, everything was a boxing thing at the end. Mr. T won. The mohawk, the personality, everything. You remember his acceptance speech at the Celebrity Hall of Fame. It's Mother's Day, Arbor Day, Mother's Day is every day's Mother's Day. Great, great stuff. The bottom line is Mr. T was a national treasure, or what do they call prodigy, because nobody knew who Hulk Hogan was unless they were a Minneapolis wrestling fan or a WWF wrestling fan, pre-shaven chest. The bottom line is, where your competitor was wrong, Mr. T was not nobody. Mr. T was a national prodigy. It was Sylvester Stallone, who happened to be in the audience, according to Mr. T. I remember the show, high ratings. He became a celebrity. That's how he got the job on A-Team. But the key is, Stallone loved Mr. T, brought him in the movie. Stallone loved wrestling, brought Hogan in. But unless you were in Minnesota or New York, Nobody knew, or a wrestling fan and reading a magazine, nobody knew who Hogan was. Mr. T, which is the reason I thanked him for extending and uplifting the extension from professional wrestling into a national level. Those are the facts. They're indisputable. The show is airable, and I'll trust Mr. T that Stallone was in the audience. And the other little side bit I can tell you from getting to know Road Warrior Animal is this. When Animal, I'm not saying he interviewed to do Dolph Lundgren's role, but he was in Stallone's office for a reason. And he said that Stallone had 3 pictures hanging in his office. One was Andre the Giant, one was Hulk Hogan, and one was the Road Warriors. That's his story. And that's where that is. All I can say about the rest of Minneapolis is we went, which is salient to our story, when we went with Brad to the office, we didn't see promos, but we were there, and you'd see people floating around. Verne Gagne came over to us. He's running the school. He comes up, and if he didn't get the information from Brad Rangans, may he rest in peace, I don't know where he's getting it, comes up, he goes, "Are you athletic? Are you agile?" And Jeff Sibbach and I, my tag team partner, just looked at each other. It's like, how do you answer that? You go to a show in St. Paul, because NWA was running in a different arena in Minneapolis, or Bloomington or whatever it was, and you come up, and there's Verne, comes up, and we're in the back of the chairs, comes up and talks to a fan, but completely ignores us. And we're in his school. I will say this that was positive. John Nord, the Barbarian. I ended up wrestling him years later in Philadelphia, or after the camp, before going to Calgary. And he came to us. He came up to us. He goes, "Yeah, Brad told me about you guys." He goes, "My only advice to you." Now, this is 1986, John Nord working for Verne Gagne. He says, "My only advice to you is, don't be a troublemaker. I know I am one. It doesn't get you anywhere." And that stuck with us. I think that's pretty much all. Oh, the last story that I get a kick
To this
out of.
day, he's still a troublemaker, though, I have to throw in there.
Yes, that's the irony. And the other 2 things were when we went in the wrestling camp, there was one person there of note, because there was people there training to be referees and so forth. So they're not bigger people. Well, me and the tag team partner, Jeff Sibbach, we were pretty big guys. And there was a wrestler there, a young wrestler called Paul Noy, N-E-U, German for new. He went on to be PN News. He was like one of the first people I'd ever seen that actually had a manager. I forget his name, but there was somebody there that sponsored him. Well, the thing is, he was over 400 pounds, some national champion wrestler, amateur. But, you know, if you're big enough, they don't have that. I'm not going to disparage everybody that's an amateur wrestler at that weight. But it's really just how big, and if you get some physics, you can handle them and so forth. Well, Sibbach and I were the only ones in the camp that could body slam PN News, Paul Noy. Well, what they had taught us was that how the ring was built. How these guys take bumps on the apron is beyond me. It's like, you're not supposed to do that. They'd say that little thing, that big thing in the middle, don't slam them in the middle of the ring. There's soft spot or sweet spots, they called them, that were around it. Well, Brad happened to be in Japan. And what ended up happening is we were the only 2 that could body slam him. Well, we didn't do it on purpose, Brad, if you're still out there. But what we did was we body slammed him in a sweet spot. That was easy. But then the other person body slammed him in the same soft spot or sweet spot, and it broke Rangan's 2x4s in his ring. So when he came back from Japan, he found that the ring was busted. Again, he has nobody to blame than himself, because I'll tell you, everybody was slamming everybody. Just if you could lift them up, toss them. Well, the first time Brad Rangan's body slammed me, I thought I lost my tongue, or swallowed my tongue. He literally slammed me through the mat. But the better story, because Brad was in Japan, this is a 3-hour cardiovascular rip roar of exercise from 8 o'clock, and it ended at 11. Well, at the end, you do real collar and elbow hookups, tie-ups for the Greco-Roman stuff, for real. Just as Brad did with us when we went for the tryouts, and pummeling. Well, the key is at the end, everybody's tired out because Brad knew when people were tired, you need to knock off, get done. Well, Brian and Sags, Knobs in particular, was in charge while he was away because they lived in the house. They had a permanent residency downstairs in Brad Rangan's home, along with 2 girls and another guy that was a cameraman or something for Verne. Well, what they did was he was out there monitoring. Well, we were taking it easy. I mean, I'm doing collar and elbow hookups with guys that are like 100 pounds lighter. And Knobs says to me outside the ring, "Hey, you guys are dancing." And we were. I kept going. He said it again. "I'm telling you, this isn't real. You guys are dancing." I shoved the kid away. Not kid, he's my age, a lighter guy. I shoved him away. I go, "Hey, Knobs, when you're man enough and have enough money to pay the piper and come in and dance with me, then you can come in and dance with me." He gave me that look like only Knobs can. Remember, I knew him before coming up here. He gets into the ring. He's fresh, but he wasn't in the same shape. So I toyed with him a little bit, let him let off a little steam and tossed him to the ground. Good friends, mind you. It wasn't no fight or shoot. Well, it was a shoot, but just a shoot with a Greco-Roman tie-up. But the line that I felt was, "You guys are dancing." Well, when you're man enough and have enough money to pay the piper, you can come in and dance with me. And he did. That's pretty much all the stories and Brad Rangan's was just a saint. Great guy, trained you, taught you what you needed to know, and we went from there. But that was the experience in Minnesota. But like I said, we were then offered to go down to Jim Crockett Promotions, which we went down a couple times. I think you may find these stories interesting. We'd go down to the Civic Center. That's where I was backstage with Jim Cornette, just hearing him talk. But we ended up, and we were driving Dusty Rhodes to the airport. And that's back when you had the Cessna in the back. You didn't have to go through customs or TSA or anything like that. Well, as we're driving, we got Nikita Koloff in the front seat. We're doing our thing that we should do to be nice and work your way into the system. I'm only 22 years old. And we're rounding the turns to go back. They're in the back of the airport to the Cessna. And here we're in the car. We got I'm in the back. Sibbach's driving. Got Nikita Koloff in the front seat. I'm in the back. Barry Windham is in the middle. And you got Dusty Rhodes on the right side. Now, everybody's trying to do the right thing. Barry was in. Nikita was in. We're trying to get in, even if we had the Road Warriors on there. So the key is we're driving along and the radio's playing. And this long-winded guitar intro from Eddie Van Halen, may he rest in peace, doing the Pretty Woman song. But it's if you don't know, you may hear Roy Orbison all your life, but you hear the opening this, and this had nothing to do with Pretty Woman. Well, the song's playing, this squealing guitar, and there's a hush over the car, like, oh my God, he's not going to like this. And Rhodes says, and I'm speeding it up, "Oh my God." No, he says, it's the next comment. He goes verbatim, "What in the hell kind of music are you boys listening to?" And just like that, it goes from the guitar intro to the actual song. And Barry Windham goes, "Well, that's Roy Orbison dust." And Rhodes goes, "Oh, I like that song." Okay, we get to the airport because we're late now. We go around a thing. The tires are squealing. And here again, you hear the tires squealing. It's like we got the older legend in the car, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? And all of a sudden, there's again a hush in the car within minutes of the Van Halen thing, because it's not that far of a trip to the airport from the Civic Center. And he goes, as the tires are squealing, he goes, "Oh my God, he's going to turn it over." Everybody laughs. Of course, Nikita Koloff laughs louder than everybody else. We get to the damn Cessna car, and Rhodes says, "If I was a rookie or a couple of wannabe rookies, I'd make sure that there is a country music station on the radio and a couple of 6-packs for the boys." Okay, next month we go down. There's still Nikita Koloff. We take Rhodes to the airport. There's no Barry Windham. We put the country music song on the radio. He says to us before we take him to the airport, "Road Warrior Animal wants me to work you into things here." and I want you to get down to Charlotte ahead of time. You're going to work with Gene Anderson and Nelson Royale. Oh, he said it's Royal, not Royale. And when we went to the airport, there was no accent on Dusty Rhodes. He was strictly business. Again, no Barry Windham, but Nikita Koloff. We had the country music station on. We did get him a couple 6-packs. I forget the beer. They were in bottles. We pulled up. He refused to take the beers. So again, I'm 22 years old. Somebody asked you to do something. I paid for this. I don't drink beer. And I got out of the car. And I remember he was already on the plane. I just leaned up, didn't have to walk up the steps. And I put the 6-packs on the plane for them. And that was it. We ended up going down to Charlotte. And where it came from there, how ironic. We didn't know where we're staying. We're just moving to Charlotte, 8 hours south of Allentown. Wouldn't you know, Becky Wentz, my girlfriend, there's a picture of her somewhere I'd like to pull up at some point because it wasn't included in your streams. And she's responsible as much as I am for everything that happened in Calgary, but we're still in Philadelphia, or done with Charlotte shortly here. So what ended up happening, we end up going down there, and how ironic, her father was best friends with the sheriff of Lehigh County, Ron Niemeyer. His son, Glenn Niemeyer, was a Charlotte police officer. He had a complex for us to move into. So we knew exactly to the address where we were moving in. Wouldn't you know, when we get there, that a person that I got to know down there, before he was Jonathan Holliday, was rooming with Johnny Ace, John Laurinaitis, Road Warrior Animal's brother. So we got to know them. I remember the story and we went to Nelson's thing up there, and a side story, and again about Dusty Rhodes and John Laurinaitis, because John may not even know this. We were up at the camp, and Dusty Rhodes made an occasional guest appearance. And I overhear him, not eavesdropping. He's in the ring. I just had 2 ears, 1 mouth. You may think otherwise now, but 2 ears, 1 mouth, you do more listening than talking. And in this case, I was listening. And I hear Rhodes tell Nelson, or whoever, maybe Gene Anderson, what we got to do, referring to John Laurinaitis, we got to get that Honeywell out of his system. He got too much of that Honeywell. You know, the people that make the thermostats, big corporation, whatever. We got to get that Honeywell out of his system. How ironic that Johnny Ace goes from the Dynamic Dudes, becomes a lead guy as a wrestler in Japan, popular with those 6-mans, but he gets the book for Shohei Baba. Shohei Baba, he gets done there. He goes to work in New York as an agent. And from what I heard, he's back now as an, I don't care, agent, talent relations, whatever you want. It's people power. John Laurinaitis. So one where, as talented as Mr. Rhodes was, he couldn't get that Honeywell out of his system. Nobody could, and that's where he is, why he's there. Why he is there now is because of that. And my last story about that is Johnny Ace drove Rebecca's car. Well, we all went together. It was Becky's car, Sibbach, Johnny Ace, and myself. The 4 of us drove to Greensboro to see the card. This is before we broke in officially there, because our first match was in the Omni in Atlanta. We drove to Greensboro, and I always dressed down, meaning I had long shirts on like I do now. Now I have nothing to hide. But back then, I just had to leave it go. Well, we're in the backstage, and Flair asked us if we could drive his car back so he could take the plane back to Charlotte. It was a Friday or Saturday night, so that he could party there. Otherwise, he'd get back into town at 2 o'clock in the morning. So after the show ended, we drove the 2 cars back. Johnny Ace drove Ric Flair's car. Very dangerous driver, because I didn't push the issue playing chicken, and I just backed off and let him pass. Well, we get back to, I don't want to say Bennigan's, I don't know, the bar or whatever. Flair was very appreciative of us bringing his car back so he could party that night. It was a wonderful show, and we ended up where we get to the bar. He buys us beers. I'll never forget. You know, a case of beer used to be 24 bottles. There was these Miller Genuine Drafts on the counter, open, but nobody's touching them. 3 rounds of 8 beers apiece when the place closed, and we're like, we're out of here. But Flair was a gentleman, a class act, appreciated what we had done, and so forth. The end of the story, as far as Charlotte, the opening match we had for me and Sibbach, we went against the New Breed in the Omni in Atlanta. It was May 2nd or 3rd. I just turned 23. And we came back out for a lumberjack match. And I'm standing next to, and there's a bunch of people in the place, 10, 12, 13, whatever the gate was, or the crowd. And I'm standing next to Baron von Raschke, whom I met with Wahoo McDaniel at a restaurant when Road Warrior Animal took us out to eat back in Minneapolis. So I'm standing next to the Baron. The main event is Jimmy Garvin against Ric Flair. And I'm standing like right where I am now, as if the ring post was up here, and they're chopping the hell out of each other. And I'm looking at this, chop, 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 chop. And Baron von Raschke leans in and he goes, "So you still want to be a wrestler, kid?" And we followed through and everything. We ended up leaving Charlotte because the real story, there was two Jeffs. They turned Beltzner into Belk, which was some like Wanamaker's department store, and Sibbach became Samson. So you got the two Jeffs. We were both named the same. And he was going out with Nikita Koloff's ex-girlfriend, which down there, if you lived together, a wife, a girlfriend, it didn't matter. It was like a taboo. You didn't go out with an ex-wrestler's thing, ex. And I get that. But he said, "I'm not going to be told who I can date and who I can't date." Well, the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back is, and to not run up the mileage on Becky's new car, we rented a car. We did not make it to Raleigh, Durham, maybe. And we were on the side of the road. It's the first time AAA never responded. And my girlfriend's father worked for the damn place. I don't know if it was a Yankee accent. I can say this. I don't know if they're still fighting the war, but when we went down there in the apartment complex, the manager of the place goes, "You know the difference between and we were getting along with him. You know the difference between a Yankee and a damn Yankee? No. One that comes to visit and one that comes to stay." Well, AAA never showed up. The farmer helped us going back and forth from the farm. There's no cell phones. This car's tire was rusted fast, as if it was in a ditch or something. When we didn't make it to the thing, they didn't fire us or anything, but we were supposed to go over against the Thunderfoot 1 and 2, whoever that was. And we never make it. When we got back to the farm, they said, "Just go home. You ain't going to make it in time." And we had been on the road for several weeks, different things. I wrestled Nelson Royale. He had wrestled some people, a bunch of spot shows and everything. I mentioned the Omni in Atlanta. We were in Chattanooga. We're Road Warrior Animal. Watched the match. He goes, "Oh, let him wait. I want to see the match." He goes, "Don't sell so much. Just register it. Don't sell it. You're too big to whatever." Gave all the advice. But at that point, I just went in out of courtesy because everything really, I think it was part of the fact that Dusty Rhodes resented new big muscle heads coming through without paying their dues, so to speak. I mean, you didn't go to another territory, do jobs on local TV and come back. We were thrust in. I mean, our first match is in the Omni in Atlanta. And to make a long story short, he resented that. There was too much of a history of, not to disrespect Tom Cassett, T.J. Khan, or Terry Sapinski, the warlord. They were big guys that they were hard to deal with. Nikita Koloff, Scott Simpson made the exception to things and got in there. But the point is, Rhodes resented that. He didn't want that. And the fact is, and now I'll Tarantino it a bit, and this hasn't been heard by anybody other than my tag team partner. I was in the car in the WWF with Arn Anderson in the back, Haku driving, and Tim Horner in the back. And he asked, what happened to the two, or Arn might have asked, what happened to the two Jeffs in Charlotte? I explained the story as I said to you. So they didn't know which Jeff was dating this Julie girl. And he got irritated. We weren't going to stay there as a tag team. And I went into JJ Dillon and I says, out of courtesy, I'm telling you why we have to leave. This was just one big, what do they call that? A cycle of a storm, perfect storm of stuff that happened and whatever. And the part that struck me as odd is when I told you about the road story in the car, I left out the part where he said about the, what's his name? It's Roy Orbison Dust. Rhodes did say to Barrett, these here boys went through Brad Rennigan's school. Barry looked over, that's the first trip, and he goes, and you made it out alive because they pushed the cardiovascular thing. I said, yeah, we did all right. So Rhodes knew we came through Rennigan's. When I spoke to James J. Dillon on the way out, I says, we took this business seriously. We took this and we came down here. We were not expecting everything of this gamesmanship and all that. But James J. Dillon said, I thought you went through Eddie Sharkey's school. So Rhodes knew where we went. He was told something different from James J. Dillon, which denotes to me that the story of our background wasn't repeated accordingly. And I do believe, may he rest in peace, I believe Rhodes kind of resented somebody shoved down his throat. Now, in 1989, Tim Horner confirmed that for me, because when I told what Arn Anderson said, sounds like a cluster bang to me. Yeah. And Tim Horner went on to tell us, and I went back and told my tag team partner, Jeff Sibbach, that I said, Tim Horner told us, I says, do you realize that Titan, the New York, wanted the Road Warriors for years? Well, no, go figure. They're hotter than pancakes on Verne Gagne's AWA. Only competition was them against anybody that appeared in New York. Well, he said 3 of the stipulations for the Road Warriors to stay in Charlotte, and this was him sounding me and us a compliment. He said there's 3 things that they demanded. They didn't have to move. Flair had to move and live in Charlotte, and yet he's from Minneapolis. The Road Warriors were not going to move anywhere. They're going to stay in Minneapolis. They are going to honor and maintain their Japan deal. Because usually if you worked for one of the major 2 promotions here, you ain't going to Japan anymore. Well, they maintained their residence in Minneapolis. They maintained their Japan deals and anything they wanted to do. And number 3, Tim Horner said, one of the stipulations was that for them to sign the contract and stay with Jim Crockett Promotions is because they wanted the 2 Jeffs to be brought in and groomed as a tag team so that the Road Warriors could take us around the world as opponents. That's when it made total sense to me as to why Rhodes took a chagrin to us. And face it, God bless the Midnight Express, couldn't maybe live up to them maybe in years, but the Bruiser and the Crusher, the Fantastics, the Fabulous Ones, the Midnight Express, that just didn't look to the audience that they could beat the Road Warriors. And this is before the Powers of Pain, before Demolition. So what Tim Horner told me, I believe to be true, and that culminated or validated Rhodes' actual resentment of us. So I haven't repeated that to anybody except the tag team partner, who was very flattered to hear that, but it made total sense. I'll tell you what, and I'll quote Jeff Sibbach, who was a nationally ranked powerlifter. I know, Hannibal, you can identify with this, is this. I was equitable to Hawk as far as weight training in the gym. I'm not saying he's not going to out squat me, but we were doing a 315 for inclines and all that. Hawk and I were similar. Sibbach had a bigger lower body. We were perfect complement. I had the blonde hair. He had the bleach black hair. People thought he kidded him like he was Peter Brady or Donny Osmond as a kid. We were baby faces. Didn't have to paint our faces or put hairs on. We looked like viable opponents. That's why they wanted us. I believe Tim Horner's story to be true. But the key is, after it was all said and done, and one of my biggest regrets, if you ever ask it at the end of the interview, because I've seen enough of your thing, one of the biggest regrets is I never did thank, because I went on from there, obviously, never did see Joe Laurinaitis again after that night in Chattanooga, Tennessee, May 4th of 87 or something like that, because whatever the reason, they went out of their way, and I think it was to better the business. And that's what Tim Horner said to me. I believe it to be true, and that, I believe, could validate my beliefs as far as what's his name, meaning Road Warrior Animal's intentions of getting us in. It was to help the business and everything.
And he did do that with Warlord. Warlord was a Minnesota guy that he had trained just to be a future opponent.
Yes, and he was big. Road Warrior. T.J. Khan, I'm not going to say was that big. He had a nice gimmick and everything, but that's Tom Cassett, also from Minneapolis. And I guess there might have been others that just was a little bit too much. I mean, that I think was a small part of it. I think that they, with their face paint, Rhodes didn't resent so much. Again, I can't get in. I'm not an armchair psychologist, although I played one on TV. I don't know what his total thing is, but that's what ended up happening. And the one thing I wanted to bring up to you, Hannibal, is along the way, and I know I've heard people talk about, like, you don't want to get into wrestling to be a star. And so I was a fan, as you know, from talking about the Ag Hall. I loved as a kid watching wrestlers, Count Billy Varga, Judo Gene LaBelle. I mean, most people don't know that Nick Bockwinkel played a heavy on Hawaii Five-0 in the late 60s. I mentioned Gene LaBelle. There's somebody else I'm leaving. Well, of course, it's Count Billy Varga, Mike Mazurki. I'd like seeing these old Munster shows or TV shows that use professional wrestlers. So when I saw Terry Funk in Paradise Alley with Stallone in 75, again, you didn't go to the movie theaters, but I was familiar with the movie. I thought, this is a movie about professional wrestling, and there's Terry Funk. And I knew him from the magazines, you know, the son of Dory Funk Sr. and Dory Funk, both tag team champions and our NWA world champions. And from there, I was always interested of wrestlers that could work their way into movies or entertainment in general. I mean, Don Morocco was on an episode of some soap opera in the early 80s. I forget which one, because he lived in Woodbridge. Again, everybody close to the area here because of the TV tapings being every Tuesday and Wednesday, in Hamburg on Wednesday, and like I said, the Ag Hall, Allentown on a Tuesday. And I think that's all the stories, not all that I can recall regarding Charlotte. So we came back, and that was it. But I did give James J. Dillon, they didn't fire us or anything. I just explained why. He goes, yeah, nobody thought, he told me, he says, they thought you just no-showed. I says, the whole story was true. I mean, this farmer came back. I mean, I'm familiar with the breaker bars to break open lug nuts that they ain't in a normal car. This guy and the farmer had to come back with pipes, which my dad did, to put leverage on. That's the only way we were able to change the damn tire. And whatever it's worth, when I returned the rental car, I never paid for it. And I told him, you have no right to charge me for something giving me defective like that. But that's why we left. We ended up leaving the territory after being down there. That's Charlotte, and that's Verne Gagne's before that.
What was the pay like as a lower card guy there in those days?
It was surprising. It was a couple $100, up to $400.
A night or a week?
A night. No, a night.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the one thing I'm not bragging or anything, but I always say I wasn't I give Sags and Knobs credit. They were AWA tag team champions, NWA and WWF. Like the Road Warriors are probably the only ones that do that. But we broke in through the last school, by the way. Brad Rangens taught us. Verne, we never really saw, other than, like I told you, are you athletic, are you agile? And ignores us over a couple fans at the St. Paul Civic Center. But the key is we went to the Verne Gagne AWA school. The Road Warriors brought us into the NWA. We had our first match in the Omni. And after Stampede Wrestling, I did have a run with the WWF when it was the WWF. And that's its own story as to where that came from and everything. So I had a bunch of independents and stuff along the way. I told you I wrestled John Nord. Boy, he learned a lot from Brody, because the irony to it is it was a car show, independent car show. It was after Charlotte, but before Calgary. And the Nord family was in the car business. They knew this car dealership owner in Philadelphia. They wanted to bring Nord in as some fundraiser. He was the only out-of-town person, but he knew I lived in the area. So even though Tom Brandy was like a headliner in this area on independent shows, just like the Cheetah Kid, who was real name Rocco Rock from the Public Enemy, may he rest in peace, Ted Petty. And you'd see him on every independent show. I didn't wrestle all the independent shows, but they were there. And with this Nord thing, because I remember Brandy looking like, why is he headlining against him? Well, Nord remembered me from Charlotte. I had a match with him headlining against Nord. You can't see it anymore, but when I came out of it, there was it was plywood against the ring, and it was a rough match. I won by a DQ, but you could still see the divot on my left leg from where I was up against, and a chair or table came across me. He didn't do it on purpose, but my leg jammed into this crappy ring's plywood, and it made a divot on there. But he was perfect to work with. The same guy that said, don't be a troublemaker. I know I was one. It doesn't get you anywhere. But I did wrestle John Nord in Philadelphia. He was stiff, but how many people back then weren't stiff? But that's the whole connection there before we get into the Calgary situation.
Yeah, I'm going to guess you weren't making $200 to $400 a night in Calgary. they were not known for paying the best in those days.
Here's my ahead of time story. Because first of all, it was, Barry Darsow said, you guys have talent. Go somewhere like Don Owen in Portland, Stu Hart in Calgary. We were given a list of 12 numbers from Brad Rangens, from Continental, Don Owen, Stu Hart. But as we got out of the wrestling camp, every business was either folding or getting bought up by other people. The Florida, or what is it, Rhodes, Crockett bought out the UWF. What Bill Watts was thinking, I don't know. Buried the talent there. Anyway, till everything was said and done, what was the question again, Hannibal? Where were we going with this?
Well, you were going to say how you got into Calgary, but I know it wasn't a bad territory, but I heard that they weren't paying that great, so I doubt you would have made the same.
It's funny you asked. Now here's my anecdotal analogy. Carl Moreno from Troma years ago said, Brick Bronski speaks in anecdotal analogies. Never knew what the hell he meant, but I'll tell a story, which is an anecdote, which is an analogy to answer your question. But when we got up there, it was Jonathan Holliday that kept pushing me, the guy that was rooming with Johnny Ace. Call Stu. I sent him pictures. He was from Jersey, he's still in Charlotte. Sent him pictures, talk to him every Sunday because the rates are cheap. Becky had that kind of number and so forth. But the point is, I push. When we got there in Calgary, we were there because of customs. We got there in the middle of the night because of a customs delay. Well, Stu Hart came himself. Now, I'm not saying he drove. He had this Willie, the African-American guy. I forget his name, but they tagged with me a couple times. He probably drove, but he waited at customs to pick us up. When he got there, he said, I didn't think that you kept telling me you were 6'2" on the phone, but when I saw your picture, your legs look too big to be on that tall. You are that tall. I'm not that tall now, but the point is, we get there, and what you heard the stories, he is in the hotel room at 3:30 in the morning, putting us in holds to see if we could squeal. Well, I was pretty strong at the time, so he could get into things, but he was pretty old, and I'm not saying anything disparaging. He knew moves. I learned a lot from him, but he couldn't I'd put him in the, and we're on this dirty hotel room floor. I'm like, God, this guy has energy. And I remember him saying two things: that he could get over on superstar Billy Graham, who I met later, but he commented on Gorilla Monsoon. This is months after that, spending time with him, where Gorilla Monsoon, he put the hold on Monsoon, Gino Morello, and may he rest in peace, Monsoon would just stand up with Stu Hart entangled on him like an octopus. But I just want to say ahead of time, before I go on with Calgary, I want to say Mr. and Mrs. Hart were a class act. We came to this territory, it was a house or a home divided. You had half the family supporting Mr. and Mrs. Hart, the parents, and I won't say half or which numbers were which numbers, but there was turmoil there from a business standpoint. I want to say the Harts, Mr. and Mrs. Hart, were a class act. The one thing I want to get out of the way that is important to me, I hear the stories because we were there for all the weeks of like every Sunday, because we had Sundays off. Friday was Calgary, Saturday was Edmonton, and Sunday, if you were so, I'm not saying I was privileged, but if they liked you, you went to Sunday dinner. Well, this house that your cohorts, I would like to see in the middle, saw Bret Hart outside the house. I would like to see in the inside of the house. Well, one of the rooms had pictures of every one of the children at a certain age. It was as big as they say. Everybody entered the back. There was two screen doors, one to the kitchen, one to the dining room. I was in the kitchen all the time with Stu, because later on, when I shattered the tibia, I spent 6 weeks on a walking crutch, which wasn't that walking early on. And while Becky went to jazzercise with Mrs. Hart, Georgia Hart, that's the mother of Teddy Hart, Allison, who lived in the guest house, former husband, mother of the two children from Ben Basarab, and Diana Hart, Davy Boy Smith's wife. Well, these would go to jazzercise in the morning. Well, I'm on crutches, so I can't wrestle. I'm kind of like, here, take the car, we're here, they go. And I sat there listening to Mr. Hart tell me stories. I was there for every bit of one or two of those Sunday dinners. They had industrial size mashed potato makers. I mean, like 12 children, and you're sometimes feeding 30, 40 people with extended tables through the house. And when I hear these stories about the spatula, where he's flipping pancakes, but he's taking cat droppings using the same spatula and moving them. I just want to say this. I'm not saying everybody that's out there that didn't see that, but I think they call it a stew drib, which is nothing new to wrestling. You tell a story to a kid on the playground, and it's so false and goofy that to see if they repeat it. I'm not saying that they didn't see Stu playing around with cat droppings and a pancake, but I'll guarantee he never served that pancake. Maybe he never wanted you to come back to dinner. And I say this to validate my story and not to talk bad about anybody. They served prime rib at least once every 3 to 4 weeks on that Sunday dinner. And he wasn't there. He was there and left beforehand because the WWF sent some people there. Bill Kazmaier, Mark Scarpa, son of Jay Scarpa, aka Chief Jay Strongbow. Leave it, unlike Wahoo McDaniel, he goes ahead and is an Italian from New Jersey playing a Native American. Well, I never met Mark Scarpa, but I'll tell you what, anybody that says Stu and Helen had no class and that somebody's flipping, like I said, if they're flipping cat turds and pancakes, I never saw it. He was as clean comes. But if Mark Scarpa asked for ketchup, and he did for the prime rib, the daughters, the parents, and I'm not saying you can't if you want your raisin juice that's A1 on your steak, that's up to you and your class. But I'll tell you what, long after the guy left, this was a big chagrin to the Hart family that somebody asked for ketchup for prime rib. And you're going to tell me this family is scooping cat manure with a spatula for pancakes? I never saw it. He was clean as a whistle in the place. And if he ever did it that they saw, I'm not denying they saw it. Maybe he didn't want them back for dinner.
Diana Hart actually explained that to me. There was a spatula that was just for cat droppings because obviously there was a lot of stray cats that he would take in. There was a separate spatula for that. And people would just tell the story like it was the same spatula. But because, he couldn't walk that well or bend that well because of all of his injuries, he would use a spatula for cat droppings. But it wasn't the same one that he cooked with.
Can I tell you the best Owen Hart rib?
Yes.
Regarding that kitchen, because we're in location right now. Now, he was younger. He wasn't in the business yet. But Stu did the cooking, and he took pride in it. Well, apparently they were making 8, 10 chickens or turkeys for Thanksgiving that came out of the oven. And as you recall, we all came in through the back door, which is why I mentioned the 2 screen doors. One screen door entered the kitchen, and one screen door entered the dining room. Well, there was a connection behind the 2 screen doors. And as his dad, as Mr. Hart, was taking each of these finished chicken or turkey dinners out to put on a table, a young Owen Hart was taking the chickens, going out on the porch and wheeling them and putting them back onto the kitchen counter. So there's only 6 chickens, but it got to a while before Stu figured out that he's delivering chickens that he keeps having to deliver until he saw what a young Owen was doing. And he said, little bastard, he said, that little bastard, referring to Owen Hart. But that's how big it was, and the 2 kitchens were divided and stuff. But as far as Owen, can't say anything bad about him. He was doing backflips from what I understand, because he was the youngest of the bunch, a year younger than I. He was doing backflips off the arm of the sofa. He was giving the cats suplexes as a little kid. He took the business seriously. He wanted the business to succeed for his parents. He took the grappling game as a sport seriously. He was undevoted to Martha, his widow that went on to become a doctor and everything. It was all about her. And if anybody asks about the Harts being big in Calgary, I remember driving through town and Owen and Martha's picture was on the back of a school, not a Lanta or SEPTA bus, but a public bus. And I mean, he was just a class act. Hannibal, the guy, went out of his way when we were on the road. When he was in town, he roomed with me on purpose. And, you know, after going through the wrestling school, being in the professional wrestling business, and then having to go down and be retrained, not retrained, but additional training. There's a difference with running the ropes and stuff with Nelson Royal, not Royale, and Ole Anderson. And then you get up there, and now it's like, damn, I still ain't in. I'm getting paid for something to be a wrestler. I still got to go to the ring in the morning. Well, the ring would be set up. You're there early. You're not wrestling that night. And Owen would insist on rooming with me so that we could go to the ring together. And he was protecting the kayfabe because a janitor or somebody working here would come out and see us playing around. And all of a sudden at the end, when Owen caught him, he would act like he was hurt by me. He goes, oh, that was too stiff. We're just practicing now. Oh, that's good. And then the janitor would look and say, oh, okay. I mean, he taught me the Texas cloverleaf that you saw eventually Dean Malenko doing at Boston Crab, but with the figure 4 thing on the legs. A lot of stuff. It was wonderful that he went out of his way like that. And he was on the side of protecting and helping his father's business. He was a bigger picture, bigger game plan. He was no party animal. If they gave you free beer at Red Deer on the way home from Edmonton, he'd take that 6-pack. He goes, this is for me and Martha looking out our patio on a Sunday afternoon. A true family man, I guess because he was the youngest, because Diana was my age. He was a year behind. They were the 11th and 12th child, and just was just a class act all the way around. Now, I know we got into Calgary. There's a lot of stories here because the fight in the dressing room was this big to the whole story. Because I never initiated a fight in my life. I could handle myself and all that. I was one of the youngest bouncers at Castle Gardens here, where to get the job, you had to take the shirt off somebody else. The head of security liked me. Nobody could take the shirt off. I never was a puncher, but I was a grappler, because you never know who can get knocked out, who can't get knocked out. But you take them off their feet, you knock them off their wind, you manhandle them, and everything's fine. Okay. So again, besides Paul Noy, PNU, we handle ourselves. We get up there. And Bruce Hart, God bless him, Helen's Bambi, as somebody called him, because all the children had nicknames. And I'm not going to, I mean, Owen was Oj, like Owen, or really like before OJ shit broke out, but he was Oj, the juice, Oj. I'm not going to get into the rest of the nicknames, but Bruce was Bambi because Helen, Mrs. Hart, got in a car accident when she was in family way with him. That's pregnant by today's standards. My dad would say in family way. They were in Montana, which is why they had the dual citizenship, and then she did it for all the children. She said, oh, this isn't the face I was born with, dear. That she had plastic surgery for this whole thing and what have you. Okay, we get there, and when I say that the people that ran the show not just wrote the checks. Anybody can dispute this later, but the facts remain. It was Stu and Helen that ran the show. I think in some ways, this is just my perception, they somehow felt sorry for Bruce. That they put him in this position to where he was, I mean, booker, finisher, who was really doing what? I can say this. Bruce Hart had no idea that Jonathan Holliday and Jeff Beltzner were going to even show up at this thing. There's only 14, 16 people on the full-time roster, and we get thrust into the situation. Stu picks us up at the airport, and all of a sudden he tells, hey, you got two people here. Hey, you got a couple guys that got to work in. Bruce had no idea. All of this stuff, and the real people, the geniuses behind this, are the ones that Stu Hart hired. Gamma Singh, the great Gamma, Champagne Jerry Morrow, Mr. Hito, Steve DeSalvo, Kerry Brown. There are wrestlers that were journeymen that were around the world that knew this business and could take and carry people to matches. And Kerry Brown coming to mind on that. If I leave anybody out, I'm sorry. Biff Wellington was real good up there. Benoit was up there at the time, but he wasn't carrying anybody. I mean, he was in Japan when I got there. I'm like, what this big hype on Chris Benoit? Who is this? Well, we come in and because he didn't know what was happening. So I get thrown on the road first. And I forget where it went, if it would happen before or after Drumheller. Here's the plug for your book, Bruce. It's chapter 12. I saw it 9 years ago. Because again, I don't check Wikipedia. I don't look at Google myself. It's not for me. I don't like the attention. And I'm looking at this, and you could see, because Amazon Press, they show you so much of the book. Well, chapter 12 of the Drumheller entitled The Drumheller Dinosaur. It's in Bruce's book. There's your plug, Bruce. Well, in the book, from what excerpts I could see, it's Jeffrey Beltzner, Jeffrey Beltzner, Jeffrey Beltzner. Never mentions once that he gave me the name Brick Bronski. Now come back to the story as we're sitting there. After the one match, because everything was fine at first on the road. My first match was against Bad News Alan Coage. And we were working out the match. And my one ear was clogged. So we're talking there, and I never met either of these people before. Didn't really know who they were. And because, again, out of the country, you don't know everything in the magazines. And Bad News Alan's standing there, and they're going over stuff. He goes, can you hear me? Will you be able to hear me? I says, yes, I am colorblind. My right ear is clogged. I'm colorblind, but my left ear is open. Well, when I realized what I said, colorblind, I remember Alan Coage just looking at Bruce like, what's wrong with this guy? I didn't mean anything by it. I'm not like a deer, but I'm red and green colorblind. Knock on good wood, I don't need glasses yet. Well, we go out, I win by a DQ. Now, I'm a clean freak, and to have any light as anything, but I get his two middle fingers, dirty fingers, not washed, and they're in my mouth, doing the whole thing. It's safe, but I'm like, oh my God, I got this dirty man's fingers in my thing. Okay, everything's fine. We go then to this place because the family, I guess, hosted the Hart wrestlers when they came in. Bruce and I are sitting on the fireplace. I give him the Dream Weaver story, and he goes, no, we got to bill you from Pittsburgh. I says, well, Bethlehem is where I was born. That's a steel town. Nobody's heard of Bethlehem, Pittsburgh, Brick Bronski. And I like alliteration. He didn't know I knew about alliteration. You know, Brick Bronski, Brick, BB King, Brick Bronski. Yeah, we'll go with that. Everything was fine at that point. It was the next trip, the Drumheller Dinosaur. In his book, he equates this to where I'm some crazy person that wigged out over this situation. Well, in the meantime, you got to understand, when we got there with Rebecca, can I show a picture of her real quick? Because she didn't get that. I just want to start talking about her. Just to show, because she was instrumental in all of this.
Great sweater you have on there, by the way.
Yeah, it's one of those Christmas sweaters. I don't know who gave it to me, but yeah. It hid my size. I didn't like showing off, except it was in 10th grade at the Ag Hall, seeing if my physique would show up on camera on Saturday. But the point is, we get there, and where was I in the story, Hannibal, here? Oh, Bruce. We get into the van, and apparently this is some rib that Jake the Snake Roberts comes up with. And he had us drive out of the way. Now, this is 8 months apart. This didn't trigger some crazy man's fight in the dressing room. It's 8 months apart. We go up there, and it's a big buildup. Somebody's driving. He's in the front, and I'm in the second seat of the babyface van. They're going up here, and Bruce is building up the story. And he says, yeah, you got this big monument up here. You know how the little guy talks with a deep voice, over the phone it works. We are, well, here, what we're going to do, we'll go up here and I'll take all the new guys up and they want to introduce them. Got a monument up there. It's dedicated. It's life-size. It's for Stu. We go out of our way because we're heading west. And now he has us going north to Drumheller. This is not the shortest route to get to Saskatoon. It's a big buildup. And understand, because of Becky, while I'm away, she's going to Jazzercise in the morning, getting to know the family, the Harts, Mrs. Hart, their darling. The backdrop, real quick story, we're at the staircase to BJ's gym. That's daughter George's husband, BJ's gym, parents to Teddy Hart. We're at the thing. It's a great story. I liked it.
I've been there. I trained in Calgary too, so I knew it.
Great gym. And I'm standing on the steps. So Mrs. Hart is above us. The first visit, because it was a holiday when we first got into town, and she says, if you guys aren't, with that New York accent, she goes, if you guys aren't busy, you could come over to our house for Sunday dinner. And then I was an actor before an actor. I humbly hung my head and I said, I looked at her, thank you, Mrs. Hart, because we have nowhere else to go. And she smiled. She got the joke. She pinched my cheek and she goes, oh, dear, look at the poor little street urchin. She got the joke. I'm doing it. Can we have more, please? And she says literally, oh, look at the poor little street urchin. That's what started it. So now we get to know the Harts. There's no injury on the leg yet, and we're going up to Drumheller. Bruce builds this whole thing up that there's a monument in Drumheller. Well, the damn town, I guess there's a lot of dinosaurs that were up in Alberta years ago. We get to the town square, and there's a life-size statue of a Tyrannosaurus Rex dinosaur. So I was lead into this big Canadian royalty, certainly now wrestling royalty. There's a monument in Drumheller. I get up there, it's broad daylight. And I'm looking at this and I'm looking for something. He goes, well, what do you think? And I'm leaning forward in the seat. He turns around and he goes, oh, there's my dad's. Don't you think it's funny? I looked, I go, Bruce. That's my dad channel in me here. He goes, Bruce, that's not, no, don't you think it's funny? I go, it's not funny. Bruce is my dad. Bruce, that's your father. And he looked at me and he didn't know what to say. I found it not funny. I found it an insult. I've heard tell, but it's gossip to say that I don't think he and his dad got along. I'm kind of sure of that. Becky, I talked to her recently, says, I think he hates, I thought he hated his father. Well, that didn't set the tone well, but that's not reason for me to break out goofy in the locker room. It happened 8 months before, but I was just being truthful. It wasn't funny, and he's making fun of his father. And he didn't apparently like that. Now that set the tone, because apparently he thought he was in control. Bruce, that is. When I knew all along, he ain't signing the paychecks. This stuff here, he didn't even know we were coming into town. To illustrate or validate my facts here, the beautiful Allison, I didn't mention it on our interview, Allison Hart, what a doll, had 2 children. I forget both their names, 2 girls, I believe. She lived in the guest house behind the house. She was married to Ben Basarab, or at least he was the father of the 2 children. To illustrate where I knew then that Bruce, they may give him like a token like to think he's in control, but they went out of their way to pick him up. Ben Basarab, met him once for a couple days. He went on the road with us on a road trip. Great worker from what I could see, built like the Dynamite Kid or Chris Benoit, good look to him and everything. But there was a falling out with the family. And when Bruce did this and put him on the road with us, I didn't say anything. This is early on. I didn't say anything, but word got back to Stu and Helen, the father and mother-in-law, of what Bruce did. It was like that Bruce Hart could not take Ben Basarab on the road anymore. What the heat was between Basarab and the Harts as their son-in-law, I don't know. That's none of my business. All I know is Mr. and Mrs. Hart overrode whatever was done that week with them trying to bring Ben Basarab back. So like I said, it was Great Gamma, Mr. Hito, Champagne Jerry Morrow, and those people there, Steve DeSalvo, and of course, Kerry Brown, Mr. Hito, Kerry Brown, Steve DeSalvo. Shinya Hashimoto was Hashif Khan. Not saying I learned much with him, but I wrestled him a lot up there before he went on to IWGP, how many time champion. And God bless him. He may rest in peace. I'm just lucky to be alive. And so here we go along the road. Now, leading up to what you're looking for here, and this has to be told from my standpoint. I knew what was going on because they put me in a 6-man tag on TV. It was Mr. Hito and Biff Wellington. I mean, we did the job, and it was against Bad News Allen, Steve DeSalvo, and maybe Champagne Jerry Morrow. I'm not sure. But the comeback, because they were teasing a breakup between the others, and I got over big, just coming in, slamming everybody on a hot tag and whatever. But when I got on the road, the people were just, after that's on TV, people were going crazy. I'm still green, but they just saw this on TV and went crazy. Well, at that point, I don't know what their thinking was to just, like, not just sugarcoat it like they did with Pillman, because again, what Ross Hart said, I can't agree with. Pillman deserved every push he got. He was talented. He's one of the best people on the promos and stuff. When I got there, I'm like, I never resented his push, as they call it. Now, granted, Bruce rode along the coattails because he, like Ross, should have stepped out. You know, this the size factor just didn't work. It didn't work. I will say this. Bruce came to me one time and he said, you know, the muscles are just a gimmick. He has the hair, bleaching the hair. He always wears a hat, has that mustache that doesn't match his hair. But he did do one time, he pushed up his head, his forehead. He had a head of hair. He wasn't bald. But his forehead, just illustrating about a gimmick, anecdotal analogy again, with regards to, I mean, the crisscross looked like fencing. I mean, only Devon Dudley, Abdullah the Butcher, and Dusty Rhodes, to the point where it damaged his eye, where he couldn't hold his eye up. I've never seen such railroad tracks on a thing. He's just all a gimmick. Muscles, bleached hair, or whatever. There were times, I'm just saying, like autistic savant, there were times like my Christopher Walken, there was Frank and Bob are going to take this hard. But there was times that he had that decent things to say. And then there was just this behind the scenes, like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. Well, word started getting back to me about him and Pillman running this wrestling camp up there. And I'll just say this again, an anecdotal analogy. If I'm going on auditions in New York and you see a guy come up and say, oh, you look like Hulk Hogan, you're a fan, you did, oh, I love you, muscle, blah, blah, blah. You go down the street, you're watching him, and he's mugging an old lady and grabbing her purse. It's not about how they treat me, it's how the people treat other people. And when I heard about, and I went through Brad Rengen's camp, the Verne Gagne school, and when I hear stories about people doing wheelbarrows, where you hold the legs up and they're calling on their hands, that's one thing if you're on grass. But to turn people's hands into mincemeat or lunch meat, and I just, it bugged me. All the things bugged me. I spoke to Becky Wentz that I showed you the picture before this, and she didn't want to come on to do anything. She said, I'll send an email, didn't want to have anything to do with it.
Didn't we use a cattle prod too when people were on the treadmill? I think Bruce told me that story himself, that Pillman would throw water on the people while they were on the treadmill that was in the basement and then shock them as well.
I'm not going to dispute any of that. I want to say this because I'm going to pull a Tarantino on you. After this shit was done and Keith Hart was in charge, Pillman came back from repairing his tricep, and he and I were like asshole buddies. That's not a gay connotation. That's just like, two guys on the road getting along. Bruce is no longer in charge. And before I left the territory, he came back. You go into the mini market when they're getting gas. Some wrestlers go in, some don't. He goes, do you want anything? No, I'll walk in with you. We became friends after this whole thing. But when I told Rebecca this, I says, I want to not talk negative about it because we became friends after that, at least to make amends, not where you just ignore each other. And she says, well, I didn't know that. I'm just saying he was a cocky jerk. Now, again, that's hearsay, but that's what she said. And he was. But the point is, I didn't begrudge his push. He did not just coming from the NFL. He picked it up quick. He was great on promos, and he could move in the ring. It's not it. He had a look to him and anything. That wasn't it. It was the personality behind the scenes. And what's interesting of note right now, to jump ahead, is I mentioned Allison, class act. She had a picture of Robert De Niro's it was called a one sheet, but it's a raging bull was in her kitchen. So she was a bit of an aficionado of film, so to speak. I mean, who knows even what the hell raging bull is? Class act to Allison. At times when I was with Becky, I'm like, boy, if I wasn't here, I'd be looking at Al. No offense to anybody, but oh God, Allison was wonderful. I mean, Diana was married and all that. But the point is, Wayne Hart, I wanted to say, the referee, the other brother. I mean, I was familiar growing up watching Tommy Young, but a shout out to Wayne Hart. I believe he's still going. He was a good friend up there. We'd go to A&W. He took me back to his apartment. He owned a double duplex with the Dynamite Kid, where he was the manager because he was always in Calgary and lived in one of them. But he was showing me the difference between sushi and sashimi, and he's cooking raw fish in a microwave. Could do a Rubik's Cube behind his back, and we played games and stuff together. But I learned so much from him as a referee that literally we'd go to the ring, to the curtain, and he would say, now just, no, you don't have to see anything, just listen. Gave new respect to Larry Zbyszko, not taking 20 minutes to take his shirt off. And he said, no, it's all what the old applause meter was. He goes, this is what's there. But in the ring, he warned me early on. He says, Brick, I'm telling you right now, if you don't kick out when you're supposed to at 2, I'm not going to look stupid as a referee. I'm going to count you out. I'm going to count 3 and you'll be pinned. He told me, because the camera's usually on one side back then, he'd do a horseshoe. He goes, you never get between the camera and the action. You circle around the horseshoe of the ring. And the other he said was, if I'm involved in an angle, and you know the classic thing, if they go to pick you up for a body slam and the legs are supposed to run into the head of the referee, he goes, don't think I'm just going to take a bump. He goes, I grab, like I'm acting like I'm stopping it. I'll pull the legs into me to make it look real. I never learned as much. I mean, best referee other than Tommy Young. I like the way he bounced all over the place, but Wayne Hart was on top of the game. Now it segues into the Wayne Hart story. We're on the road at some point. Wayne goes into Bruce Hart's coat. I can still picture it. It was one of those lumberjack things that had little pockets everywhere. I don't know what Wayne was looking for. It could have been a lighter for all I know. Wink, wink. He goes into the pocket. He pulls out a piece of paper, easily handwritten, delineated on the upcoming results of a match on a day before the card even took place, along with critiques of the matches and the so-called star rating. Well, it turns out I knew about Meltzer's newsletter. I had it beforehand. But once you went on the road, they kind of kayfabed me until I got in with Diana, who's now giving me Meltzer's newsletter. And I'm reading reviews. -4.5 stars. Worst match in Calgary history. Worst match in the history of professional wrestling. Well, here it is. Wayne, not me, looks in, pulls out this thing. This is the little piece of paper that's going to Dave Meltzer's Wrestling Observer newsletter. Here's your plug, your pat on the back before you get the punch in the stomach. How's that for an old line? And we're talking figuratively, not literally. And we're looking at all this and the results of it. Wayne's showing me, he goes, well, it's one thing, and he's talking about his brother. Well, it's one thing to do something this stupid or this corrupt, whatever his word was. He goes, it's something to do something like that. But it's even dumber to leave it in your coat pocket for somebody like me to find, meaning him. We put it back into the pocket and went our way. It didn't mean that much. And Pillman was his boy. We get that. But as what's your competitor call him, Uncle Dave? He should have done a little bit more researching as a broadcaster, as a journalist, because it's called yellow journalism. You should have had some common sense, some good goddamn common sense to look at it and say, my matches are on TV. Are they the greatest? I don't know. But they take a match that wasn't first, and if you look at it now on YouTube, they're the opening matches. They weren't the opening match. Am I great? No. But it ain't no negative 4.5 stars. But here's where you screwed up. As smart as you think you were. And there's Bruce Hart in his book calling me, or in his interview, 3 times in a minute and a half, that idiot Beltzner, idiot Beltzner, idiot Beltzner. Well, I'll tell you what, Bruce, we may not be the same, but I'll take an IQ test against you any day of the week, and you're a smart guy. You were pampered, but you ain't no dummy to that degree. But here's my question to you. When I hand this fanzine to Kerry Brown, which what they weren't thinking, both of them, Meltzer and Bruce, looking at it and say, well, this guy was so bad, they forgot about the person with whom I was in the ring. So when your negative bastardization of the art was a reflection on Kerry Brown, when I showed him these reviews, a negative 3.5, 4-star, worst match, whatever, Kerry was livid. He goes, quote, I could have a 2.5-star match with a broomstick. What we have here is a stooge. And he went running across the dressing room looking for Ross Hart. So Ross, I'll give you credit for being probably the most honest in all your interviews. And all you said at the end, well, I think Pillman got the upper hand. Well, we'll see about that. I'm getting to it.
One other thing I have to mention, why would you give a match from your own company negative stars? Because it's also a poor reflection on your own company. You should try and protect it.
Now you're on my side, Mr. Hannibal. Yeah, but Kerry Brown did not appreciate it. It was dumb. They should have just said, I think in the last interview, I said, just say 0.5 star, 1 star. Just subtly make Brick Bronski go away, which is what they wanted to do. Again, trying to destroy the people they don't like, to quote somebody famous. And I looked at this, and it didn't bother me at the time. It's like, I'll move on. I don't need Meltzer, and I don't need the guy. At the time, he was in a trailer next to Jim Rockford from the Rockford Files, meaning they lived on the trailer on a beach. But anyway, it don't matter where you come from. But the point is, he should have done a little more research. But you're absolutely correct. It's a poor reflect. When he went beyond Stampede Wrestling, he went to the worst match in professional wrestling history. So yes, you're right. They should have fired me. If I was that bad, they should have fired me long before I got there, or saw some tapes, which they didn't, or understood early on. The guy the guy does have 2 left feet. Oh, he's a 275-pound man that can do reverse handstring spring up to a whatever into a jackknife stand-up. It's like, I'm not putting up myself. I couldn't throw a drop kick. Without injuring myself. Owen showed me, if you'll notice, Owen always used a mule kick, drop kick. He showed me that. I go, I can't throw a drop kick.
Neither could Hulk Hogan, though, by the way, but you definitely had the look. I will give you that. You went on to go into movies. So it's not always technical ability.
It's true. I'll quote Stu Hart, because I got some good Stu Hart stories. He said to me, and that what endeared myself to superstar Billy Graham in one of the pictures years later. And he said to me, you're the best looking specimen I've ever seen come through the industry. He says, you have a beautiful chassis, but we need to get an engine. We need to put an engine in you. So back to where I'm on crutches. After the Edmonton thing, you'll see it in a January match from Stampede. I got white boots. In April, I got brown boots. There's a total difference there. Am I perfect in the ladder? No, but there was misplacement of things. Didn't know placement. It's a sequence. If I'm getting up to go from here to there, got to pick up things along the way and pick them up along the way back. You don't go from here to there and whatever. The point is, we get up to the setting time. I spent those 6 weeks were priceless. Hannibal. I was able to live with Davey Boy Smith, the British Bulldog, and his wife. That's a separate story. When I fractured the tibia, Becky, who you saw, was already in with the Hart girls. Well, where we were staying at the 333 house we could not, I couldn't function with an old school cast on my leg. I couldn't even wash my head under the spigot of this little old thing. I said, we have to go. When I went to Sunday dinner, we had to go. Diana Hart, I never met the British Bulldog yet. And she said, you don't have to leave. She discussed it again on the side of the Harts of the business. She said, you don't have to leave. I spoke with Davey. We want you to move in with us. I don't think they would have let Davey boys, Diana wouldn't, Bret Hart's sister, I mean, she was gorgeous. I'm talking, and she still is. We're talking a page 3 Calgary Sun girl and never did nudity. Just a classy, beautiful, beautiful statuesque woman. You know that Bryan Adams, your fellow countryman, was enamored with her, wanted to marry her. There's a song on one of his albums that is about Diana. Well, we move into the house. I remember they had a bidet in the main bathroom, which I could wash in a tub, and the bidet wasn't used. It was the children's toys in it. Well, anyway, when we get there, Harry Smith Jr., that you know, is Harry. I don't know what he goes by now. It's Harry Smith. It's Davey Boy Smith Jr., but it's Harry Smith. Anyway, he was in diapers. I'm sitting on a couch with a crutch, on crutches, and all he wanted to do is free. Channel 3, you had to have on, because that was the dial to watch tapes, wrestling tapes. I never was a tape trader. I was a fan. I'm sitting there, Hannibal, watching Satoru Sayama, the original Tiger Mask, and Dynamite Kid Tom Billington from Madison Square Garden, and which wasn't televised. I see that tape. And then I'm watching, not the same match, the same matchup from Japan. Oh my God, it was 3 times more complicated than from Madison Square Garden. And Davey Boy told me all the wrestlers came around and watched through the curtain in Madison Square Garden to see this match. Dynamite Kid and Satoru Sayama. We're paused on this end. Can you still hear me, Hannibal?
I can hear you, but I'll try taking you out and putting you back. That might... You're still frozen. Maybe...
Not a good look on me either. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You got a great sense of humor, my friend, and I still respect you getting in the ring with Abdullah the Butcher, the mother. And I'll tell you, go ahead.
Is there any way you could log out and log back on?
He's not in. Dale! Oh, I don't know how to run this shit. I'm greener than a green. I'm greener than a green pepper tree, to quote a local yokel.
We may have to eventually do a part 2 on this because your answers are so detailed. And
Mr. Schneck, we got froze here, and Hannibal's asking if we can log out and log back in.
I know. I'm watching you on television, and it's getting really bad.
Okay, so here's what happened. They got a bad look here, and it doesn't.
I do love this look. I'm using this as the screenshot for the video.
It's in one of the movies, I'll assure you. Okay.
So,
hold on. We're on this, Hannibal.
Oh, your daughter finds this funny too. She's watching.
Yeah, I'll bet she does.
I'm not sure. I guess I can. You want me to log out totally?
I don't know what you're asking. What are you saying, Hannibal?
I would say just log them out and then click that same link again. That'll refresh it.
All right, I'll try that.
So thank you, everybody, for your questions as he logs back on. Obviously, he's going into great detail in this, so it doesn't look like I'll get to many fan questions. We'll give his daughter a shout out because she's the one that helped hook this interview up, and I'm hopefully going to interview her one day. As she says hello on here. Hopefully he can figure out how to get back on here. Smartphone thinks that makes the show even better. Donnie thought this was one of the best interviews. I'm glad you guys enjoy it. Hopefully he can get this story out about the Pillman incident because it's been taking a while to get to it. But I know he wants to set the record straight on that because we only ever get the Pillman side of that whole fight situation. So hopefully he can get back on here and finish it. Oh, here he is.
There you are. I appreciate your patience, Hannibal. You know, the younger generation with their attention deficit disorder and immediate satisfaction. Nobody wants to wait for anything more. It's why MTV 3-minute movies, and now we can't talk too long about anything.
I think it's actually the ghost of Brian Pillman. He doesn't want your side coming out.
Hey.
So he managed to freeze this just as you were about to tell the story.
Let me tell you, Hannibal, I have avoided talking about this anywhere publicly. If a schoolmate of mine I run into 3 years ago when my only sibling died, my parents are gone, my brother's gone, and he came to me, he goes, you know, you're in the top 5, you're in the top 25 real fights in the dressing room. I go, what? I looked this up. I told him the whole story that I'm about to tell you. But the number one story is Bruiser Brody, who was murdered in Puerto Rico. I don't know the particulars. I got to meet him with Abdullah the Butcher in Hanover. And I would never gone to Puerto Rico, maybe before, but not after. But all I'm saying is this whole, it's crazy of all of this. So when you get in the ring with Abdullah the Butcher, that's one thing. The one thing I can tell you before we move on is everybody called him, and you know him better than I did. Everybody called him Abby. Well, in the shower with Abdullah the Butcher and Bruiser Brody, and they were commenting to me, hey, what do you think? He called him Butch. Bruiser Brody called Abdullah the Butcher Butch, not Abby. So back to Stu Hart. Brian Pillman, where did we leave off?
You went on the little tirade about Bruce giving the Wrestling Observer match reviews before the matches happened, and I think it was around that time where you froze.
Okay, well, what I can say, and I'll repeat it, which is maybe why the ghost of Brian Pillman stopped. I knew Meltzer was into Pillman. He was before Pillman ever met me. I knew the newsletter before I got up there. The moral of the story is we were both pawns in this system. I told you that we came to a house divided, a home divided. The girlfriends called, I thought he was a cocky jerk. I says, well, she didn't even know he died. I let this rest, is my point. I didn't want to drag up these things. The guy can't defend himself on anything. And it was all in the past. So when we got there, I didn't disrespect anybody. I just was a 22, now 23-year-old kid. Shoot, the British Bulldog and Diana Hart took me for my 24th birthday in 1988. I went on crutches to the Winter Olympics were up there. Now we're living into the same house with him, which drew things closer. Yes, we found the results for Meltzer's newsletter in the pocket. Wayne did. And it comes back and Wayne said, if you didn't catch it, well, it's one thing, my brother, to do this, he called it something which was crooked. You don't review matches, give reviews before the matches occur. But he did. And he goes, but it's even dumber to leave it in his coat pocket for somebody like me to find. Where you commented and said, well, he was known to do certain things, but they were trying to blackball me because back then you had a handful of smart fans or whatever they call them. And the rest of the people were really, it went back and forth with the industry. Ross Hart was the connection to Meltzer. Finkel was a WWE. Howard Finkel, may he rest in peace if he's still alive, was a connection to Meltzer. And Ross Hart and Finkel were friends, from what I understand. Okay, we find the stuff. We move on. I realize now that this guy doesn't like me, meaning Bruce. It's like, well, guy told my dad years ago, customer, I'm not running, or he said to the boss, I don't like your boss. He says, well, I'm not running any popularity contests. And the guy sent time out for my dad to go back and tell the customer he's not running any popularity contests. I wasn't cared about any of this because I was caring about the sport. I love this business. I grew up watching it. It wasn't like, how can I be a star on TV? I took it very seriously, and I took family very seriously. That's why when I say my parents are gone, my brother's gone, I'm the only one left. And he was 3 years younger, and he died 3 years ago. Massive heart attack, and he's in better shape than I was, or he was in better shape than I am. And I just couldn't see Bruce, just besmirching his father. Okay, we jump ahead. We find the stuff in the thing. Now we'll jump ahead to the story. I told you about Wayne Hart, one of the greatest referees, not just that I knew him, I learned from him, and you watch him in the ring. He knew what he was doing to make the sport look good. He wasn't going to make himself look bad, but he knew what he needed to do to keep it real. Okay, now here's what happens. As things progress, now we're back on track. I shatter my tibia. Diana Hart brings us into the home of the British Bulldog. Driving up the driveway. Oh, I just wanted a reasonable home, but Diana had to be on the lifestyles of the rich and famous. All the wrestlers wore the cowboy boots, and they drove these damn Ford Broncos. None of them knew about Fords. Always broke down, always needing a fix, whatever their acronym is. Well, I will say this, and a little side story. When Davy Boy Smith would sing along to a song, he had a clear British accent all the time. But when he sang along to an American song, George Michael or otherwise, he had no British accent. He loved when his mother came into town. In one of those pictures, Hannibal, the picture that a fan took with me and Stu Hart arm in arm in the dressing room, it's right next to the one with me and Steve Blackman. There's a little girl looking in and caught in the shot. That little girl's more important, as far as I'm concerned, than me with Stu Hart. That's the picture. But to the left of that picture, there's a little girl looking in. That little girl, that's Jeff Sibbach. But that little girl next to the picture of Stu Hart, maybe you compose it that. Bottom line is, that's the younger sister and only sibling, may she rest in peace, of Davy Boy Smith, the British Bulldog. She and Davy Boy's mother were in town while we were living with Davy and Diana, and she happened to come to the matches that night. So 6 weeks there, I just want to say this. Now we're coming everything together with Calgary. I'm living with Davy Boy Smith. I'm watching with Harry Smith, Channel Free, Channel 3, the tapes. But I'm sitting with Stu Hart every morning for jazzercise. I'm dropped off. The kitchen was it was picture perfect. Harry Smith, the little guy that's now the big wrestler, great worker. He's in there. He's a toddler. We're babysitting him because he's with his grandfather and me, and they're dropping off for the hour and a half for jazzercise. Well, I remember two things of Harry. His dad would take a fork and mush up bananas, stale bananas. Not bad to eat. Just mush them up, feed them. And the kid ate them up. He goes, it's no different than it's all what they do, and it's all what they put in baby food. I'm like, you're right. Bananas in the banana jar is what he's feeding him. Well, the kid drops his drawers, and he's a toddler. He's masturbating and all. Stu says, he's checking out the equipment. Okay, now we move over. I learned a lot from that kid, that boy.
I'm going to be sending him that clip, by the way.
Please do. It's great. And if he disputes, I help potty train him. I never wiped his diaper, but I taught him. He was shitting on the steps, a la the dog that superstar Billy Graham gave him. So please, I have the utmost respect for him, but he helped me. Free. I said he had long blonde hair. He'd throw tantrums in the supermarket, his mother said, Bret Hart's sister. And all she'd say, he goes, well, when he throws a tantrum, all she'd say is, ain't he cute? I've used that with my own children years from now. Thank you, Diana. Okay, so I'm learning about the tapes, watching the tapes without ever being a tape trader. Had nothing better to do. It's not like he's taking away my programming. He's looking at it and got free, and we're watching all these tapes, not just Satoru Sayama and Tiger Mask. Okay, at the same time, in the morning, I'm sitting with Stu Hart. Beyond the banana mashing and the clean kitchen and everything, he's checking out the equipment. He's sitting there, he's talking to me. Learned a lot about wrestling. Didn't have to put in 5 years because he'd sit there and he goes, hey, you like to eat? Again, an anecdotal analogy before I use them. Hey, you like to eat, don't you, Jeff? Yeah, I do. He goes, well, when you go to the buffet, he goes, there's a lot of stuff there. You got the salad, you got the shrimp, you got the prime rib and everything else. If you waste your time on the salad and don't go right for the prime rib and the shrimp, you'll be left out. I'm like, yeah. He goes, don't wait for the heel to tell you something. Because he's watching the matches on TV. And he goes, don't wait for the heel to call something. Because otherwise, you'll end up at the salad bar or the buffet with nothing but salad and lettuce. He goes, get there early. Don't wait for him to call something. Just get there, get the shrimp, get the prime rib, just get everything that you need. Don't wait for the heel to call the match. The next story I give you, Hannibal, is priceless. I say that because Stu Hart would look down on us and smile because we talked a lot about things. I learned from Channel Free with Harry. I learned a lot. At the same time, 6 weeks on crutches as I did with Stu. And here's my story before we get into what happened. This is the end of Act 2. I spoke highly of Diana, Allison, Wayne. I'll get to Dean, but you don't know him yet. And everybody else. Okay, you know about the Drumheller dinosaur. Okay, we're sitting there. And Stu Hart tells me this story. Now, this is coming from him. Now, you know this business was based in Kearney. He goes on to tell me, because we're just sitting there, we're watching some damn programming in the morning from the States. I don't know if it's Oprah or Phil Donahue or if they were even on the air then. And it didn't matter because I'm talking to him with the mushed bananas and he's testing out the equipment. Well, we were standing. He had long blonde hair. His mother had him with hair. He had the mullet. Harry Smith had the mullet before anybody else. The boy. Anyway, he tells me this story about a female wrestler. I forget her name. If I remember the name, it's not worth it to besmirch her because I don't remember the name. It doesn't matter. Yes, she didn't have a fondness. She didn't go out with men, but she had an affinity for this dog, this German Shepherd, and they went everywhere together. Never went out with men. And there was a time where they left the hotel room and they left on the gurney. And apparently the dog was lodged on top of the woman with the gurney, with the sheet over it on the gurney. And he looked at me cryptically as they took them to the hospital. He goes, Jeff, the dogs ain't built the same way as you and me. And I'm looking at this. I'm listening to this, and he's telling me a story about a woman that's in love. This is bestiality. In love with a German Shepherd that had to go to the hospital. But when he said, I'm thinking like, fuck, I had geography. I had biology lessons. Jeff, the animal, the dogs, they ain't built the same way. So I'm taking this story in. I got to take it as gospel. And I happen to come up. I'm not a topper. I don't need to have somebody tell me a story and then I go ahead and get a better story. But here's the end of it. And here's my Stu Hart. God bless him. I'm listening to this. I'm on crutches. I'm like, you're telling me about a dog, German Shepherd lodged in a woman. I'm like, hey, well, in Philadelphia, in trading places, in Philadelphia, it's $50. Bo Diddley for the price of a gun. In Philadelphia, your Canadian story ain't the same. I didn't say that, but I'm thinking about it like, well, right now, before I left, there was a KYW newscaster NBC affiliate, one of the three, NBC in Philadelphia, looked like Clark Kent. Can I mention his name, Dale? I shouldn't. He was Jerry Penacoli. I'm sure he had enough money, but it turned out that the story in the area, because we're 45 minutes, we're part of their viewing area here in Allentown, or there in Allentown, as it were. And it turns out Jerry Penacoli, he looked like Clark Kent with the glasses, handsome man, whatever. Well, apparently, this is before Richard Gere. There was something about people putting rodents in the rectum. Here's your alliteration. Rodents, whether it's gerbils, rats, rodents in the rectum. Well, this story happened, and it was a big to-do here in Philadelphia, there in Philadelphia. And, you know, you work in a hospital. You don't go just by the news broadcast. The news exercise the end of his contract and then had to let him go, but they couldn't let him go before the end of the contract. Well, he had to go to the hospital because he couldn't remove this gerbil from his rectum. I'm telling Stu Hart this story. He's taking it all in. But he, at the end, I says, yeah, according to the story in the hospital, they said he had to have surgery because he cut himself shaving. And Stu Hart's sitting to the right of me, and he took a while to absorb this information. He looked, and I hope you can see this. He goes, he winced is the word. Meaning, got a carny guy telling me about a woman with a dog inside of her. I tell him this story. He winced. He cut himself shaving. I go, that's the story they gave. But after his contract went up, he left the territory. This is an NBC affiliate news in Philadelphia. Now, it'd be days after. We're sitting watching stuff in the morning. Harry's eating his mushed bananas. And he goes, he cut himself shaving. He'd repeat, he'd bring up, it stuck with him. And now the end, my third act to the story. God bless you, Stu Hart. Sense of humor like nobody else. We're at these Sunday dinners. And there'd be dozens of people here. I'm at the other end of the table. He'd tell a story about somebody that got injured or somebody that was on the sidelines. And I'd yell, and he did it occasionally too, but I did it more than he. And I'd yell out, oh, maybe Mr. Hart, he cut himself shaving. And he would wince again. He'd laugh. But nobody in the room at this Sunday dinner knew what the hell we were talking about. It was a true inside joke. But Mr. Hart, all you had to say was, maybe he cut himself shaving. Like I'm a fucking dumb mark, and maybe he cut himself shaving. He'd look at me, and no matter what he was complaining about, he'd start laughing on this guy. I'm not going to mention his name again, from Philadelphia, but yeah, maybe he cut himself shaving. This guy was a class act, and yes, you don't ask for ketchup for prime rib on a Sunday dinner. It was always a great spread up there. So Diana Hart told you right, but part of that separate spatula was a stooge rib, meaning I swear I think he did that in front of people to make sure they never came back. Because I don't know how many times Mark Scarpa came back because he asked for ketchup for prime rib. They told me that story so much, and Diana Hart, ew. They never said it to him. No offense to him, but it was like, ooh. It didn't rub the right way. You're talking about the same bunch of Bret Hart when he was there looking at my girlfriend Becky's Reeboks or Asics, whatever the white sneaker was back then. And he's going, that's the kind of sneaker I like a girl on. Not saying he was hitting on her, but a class act. By the way, Julie and the Dynamite Kid's wife would often be there with Jaden Dallas, Bruce, Brett's children, and Bronwyn, and I forget the other name was younger. The two, the Michelle and Brett's wives were often there at the Sunday dinners with their children. I just want to say that too.
And that was to lead into how this whole Pillman thing started. You were just showing that you were actually on good terms with most of the Harts, other than, I guess, Bruce.
Okay, here's what happened.
Bruce was the booker at that point, I believe, because Brett was already in WWE at that point, I believe.
Now, it depends, Hannibal, on your definition of booker. Is that the finisher? Is it the guy that actually flew in the talent? Or is it the guy that actually put the marriages together? That's my question to you, and that's sincere. I'm not setting you up.
I guess Booker would be the guy that puts the storylines and finishes together. Sometimes there's a different guy that does the finishes and storylines, but usually when I worked for Stampede, it would be Bruce doing both. Although Ross would do it on some towns that had a different storyline than the Calgary shows.
I'll just say this, because I do know that the Harts had, even if the irony here is that, and Becky said, that's gossip with what Becky said. But I mean, I never got up into the office where Mrs. Hart, you know, their office, I was at the downstairs all the time. Becky was up there with Mrs. Hart in where they had the filing cabinets. This is before internet and the phone line and all the records of anything. The Harts ran, Mr. and Mrs. Hart ran the show. As far as Bruce, I mean, I really didn't know who I knew Brett, not by name, and the British Bulldogs, of course, and Bruce and Neidhart, Jim Neidhart. And I knew of the territory, but I never knew who Bruce or Ross was. And I do believe that, oh, it's just common sense. You're looking at this. I told you about the gimmicks, the hair, the face. Bruce, see, Ross was smart enough to just step back. It wasn't big enough. Bruce rode on Pillman's coattails, became the tag champs, and the father couldn't do anything about it. Those kinds of things were worked out. But as far as bringing the people into the territory, and I'm not saying extolling my virtues, Bruce didn't know who the hell I was, and I didn't know who the hell he was. But Gamma Singh, I'll say him again, Mr. Hito, Bad News Allen, wonderful to work with, Champagne Jerry Morrow, I said Mr. Hito, Shinya Hashimoto, but he didn't teach me, and he was brought over as sent over as a young boy. But Steve DeSalvo knew what he was doing as a strongman. He could structure 3-act plays, if you will, do whatever he needed to do, and got over. They stuck me with him, and not saying stuck. Sorry, Steve, I spoke to him a year ago. Great guy, lives in Minnesota now. Stiff as shit, stiff as heck. But he knew enough about the game. It's just he was too stiff for the business. It wasn't the days of the Bruiser and the Road Warriors, just as 10 years later. But Bruce was put in a position, he put himself in a position as however you labeled him. It's because the Mr. and Mrs. Hart looked out for him as the second child. He was Bruce's Bambi, or Helen's Bambi, according to the Dynamite Kid. I'm giving little foreshadowing to lead up to the story, but as I'm living this, I'm like, I had nothing against anybody. I was just, I was put in a position where, from Bruce's side, like, why are you going to my dad's dinner every Sunday? I was invited. I mean, I was put, and Pillman as well. We were pawns. I said this before. I don't know if you saw this part, Hannibal. We were pawns put in the middle of a chess game. Bruce, Davey Boy, had a thing against things. I know that the night of the fight in the dressing room, they never, because Diana told me, when they left Calgary, were in the WWF, even if they were not in town, or even if they were in town, they never came to a Stampede TV taping every Friday. I was the first time that brought them to the Calgary TV taping is because of this buildup to the fight with Pillman. And to backstory this, Davey Boy Smith, I'm living with him. I'm no longer on crutches. I've been going to the gym with him for a while I'm living there. When he's in town, little side story, I'll make this quick. Diana Hart, because we got along with everyone. Diana Hart said to me, oh, when Davey's on the road, his best friend's the Ultimate Warrior. But when you're home, you're his best friend. Which I can validate by saying that when he was in town, we'd drive. I'm on crutches. We're going to BJ's gym working out. So before you ask, because I've done enough research, I worked out with the British Bulldogs often. He had the second or third largest bench press, which was over 500. Dino Bravo, and I believe the Barbarian, not Nord, the other one, had bigger bench presses. So I would work out with him regularly, and sometimes I was on crutches. And I remember going to BJ's gym. I could work out, and I'm bragging up because you could look at me and see, oh, I'm doing 315-pound incline bench presses. I'm doing 275 behind the neck presses. My bench press wasn't that much. I could do 405 for reps, 8-10 reps. And Davey Boy, oh, come on, let's do a single. He spotted me, and to answer your question before you ask it, he made me do a 455-pound. It was 4 plates and the 2 quarters of a 400. And I was a repetition guy. I did not do singles, doubles, triples. He forced me with him spotting. I did a 455-pound single. It was so slow it might have well have had a pause at the bottom. Okay, done with that. I can get back to you on a squat and deadlift. I've done some research about you. The point is, we're up there working out with Davey Boy. I got to know him, got to do things. That's how I knew he could sing in English, but he spoke in British. We go out at the same time. Dynamite Kid lived a couple miles down the road, not in as nice of a house, but he had a barn with a ring in it. Back to the story about I'm in the business now. Do I have to go to Ole and Anderson and what's his name, Nelson Royal? Do I really have to go to the ring every morning with Owen Hart? Dynamite Kid says, because I know it's because I'm living with his cousin. Come out! I need to teach you. You need to come out to the ring. Well, who the hell is going to turn down the Dynamite Kid after seeing everything and knowing the legend that he is? Okay, I head out there. This is no camp. It's just the two of us. He had a ring in the barn set up for rain purposes. I get out there. It's just the two of us. I'm like, who the hell else is here? I think it was competition with his cousin, that I was living with his cousin. Okay, we get out there. I'll never forget. He just took a shower, puts fresh clothing on. I guess he was a chain cigarette smoker, but the bottom line, I can tell you, tying up with the Dynamite Kid, and I'll call him Dynamite Kid, not Tom Billington. I never called him Tom Billington. And I called Davey Boy Smith David, never Davey or Davey Boy. He was David. Just like I never called Road Warrior Animal Joe or Road Warrior Hawk Mike. It's Animal, Hawk, Animal. Here we are. I get out to the ring. I'm like, why the fuck am I here? Okay. I get out there. I knew why. I get in the ring. I wait for him. He takes a shower. Dude, the guy smelled like cigarette smoke. Not because he smoked a cigarette. He just had a shower. His clothes were clean. It exuded from his pores. I can tell you as we get into the ring, we're tying up. This, if you can see it, is rock hard. In my prime, this is not rock hard. The big muscles are soft. When you touched the Dynamite Kid, Tom Billington, everywhere, And that's not a gay connotation. You're tying up with him. You're touching him everywhere. It's fucking rock hard. I'm like, holy shit. And he exuded tobacco, even though he just took a shower and he's in fresh clothes. He comes out there in the middle of his ring. It's just me. I'm like, what do you want with me? He goes, anybody can do a headbutt off top ring. What I'm teaching you, 80% of the wrestlers on the roster don't know in the WWF. And that happened. He was showing me tying up the tight stuff that everybody's missing now. And he's showing me the Irish whip from the turnbuckle to turnbuckle, from the ring to ring. So no offense to Barry Windham. When you're doing this, pulling somebody and slapping them on the back and they run, no good in Calgary. Great worker. Love Barry Windham. These here boys went to Brad Rennigan's school and they made it out alive. Yeah. Learn so much. It ain't about a headbutt off the top rope. Tom Billington, may he rest in peace, thank you for dragging me out to your barn. Okay, follow up. Davey Boy Smith comes to pick up the car because, Dynamite picked me up from Davey's house. It was only a couple miles away. Davey takes the car that Stu Hart loaned us, comes and picks me up. As we're leaving, a great session, everything fine. And all of a sudden, Dave and I are leaving, and there's British Tom Billington is shooting, I don't know, a BB gun, shotgun. He's shooting at Stu Hart's car as we're leaving the damn driveway. And I'm in the driver's seat. Davey's driving. I look over and I go, I thought I got along with the guy. I go, Davey. That time I might have called him Davey. Because he's only a couple miles down the road, picks me up to go back for dinner. I go, is he shooting at the car? He goes, yeah, I think he is. Now, I don't know if he's playing up the rib. I'm playing it along. You want to shoot at me? That's fine. You're shooting at you, just as you said, Hannibal, about the ribs on the damn reviews of the wrestling. If he's shooting at it ain't my car. It's Stu's car. It ain't me driving. It's Davey Boy. I go, I think he's shooting at the car. And Davey Boy goes, he is. He's shooting at the car. I said, is there any chance of him hitting the gas tank? He goes, I don't know, but we got to go. And away he went, because I'm thinking if the car blows up, it ain't going to be me. I'm young and dumb. If he's dumb enough to do it, and Davey Boy, you're only a year or two older than I am. That's a true story. So when they say about Dynamite Kid, he didn't hit no gas tank. He was shooting bullets or fucking BB guns at Stu Hart's 1969 Chrysler New Yorker. We couldn't get one of the Cadillacs. We weren't that far advanced in the territory. That's my history with Dynamite Kid up until the fight. Why don't you ask me about Matilda, that damn dog? Should have been put down, should have been destroyed humanely. And then we'll move on. You'll get everything you want, Hannibal. You spend your time, you'll get everything you want. God bless you. I will never get in the ring with Abdul the Butcher. And when I tell you about when I met Dusty Rhodes, and all I do to mention the town Allentown, and he goes, yeah, I was there, Allentown, Pennsylvania. It was that show, not at the Ag Hall, NWA thing, Superstar Billy Graham with his the karate gimmick before he got big. And I said to Rhodes in the car, oh yeah, we're from Allentown. We were ruined from the beginning, Hannibal, because I said, we're from Allentown, Pennsylvania. Allentown, Pennsylvania. Oh my God. All I can remember is that match with Abdul the motherfucking Butcher. That's his line. It ain't me cursing. It's in Allentown. That with the that bill of the motherfucking butcher, and that hot tub with baby doll, and little Tully with baby doll in the. We were done before we got there. There's a callback joke to what they call that. So we're back to Calgary. You're going to get your story.
Yeah, before I ask you about the dog, maybe we should find out exactly what happened with Pillman.
Okay, here you go. There was heat up there on both sides. I'm now living with the British Bulldog and Davy's wife, but his Bret Hart's sister. I mentioned Allison. Wayne in the middle. There's another brother I've yet to mention. Wayne, the referee, he didn't want to get in the middle. He was just comfortable with his paycheck. Buy the double duplex, do what you can and retire. Okay. Now, the Drumheller dinosaur we've covered. Everything keeps building. Wayne and I find this shit in his coat. I wouldn't be dumb enough to let people like you and me find it. We let it go. Okay. There's heat now. I can see the booking. It ain't just who's losing to who. It's spot shows. I was okay on TV. Nothing like that. We go ahead. We go to Western Canada. There was shit that went on. Bruce do you remember Carl Moffat, Jason the Terrible?
Yes, very well.
Good guy. I don't want to say anything because he's still around. He paid his dues. He was Carl Moffat, went to Puerto Rico, came back with the Jason the Terrible gimmick, and he would just take a beating and just kept coming up before Undertaker and Kane ever just leaned up from a bump. Nice guy, but he was a manipulator. He was manipulated just like Pillman was with Bruce. Well, Carl Moffat on the road, if you remember, he had a mask on plus the Jason the Terrible thing. Again, the blading. Bruce would have Carl blade. Now, to get blood through one mask and then another mask to still show was one thing. However, at the same time, Ed Whalen. Now we are talking about Ed Whalen. What a saint of a man. I'm just telling you right now, I don't care that he ran shows in the morning, children's programming. He controlled television. I knew that then. A simplistic guy, may he rest in peace. How do you want to say it? Just a good old boy north of the Mason-Dixon line. And I mean that positive. Just an excellent guy. I got to know when he'd do the interviews with me, I knew he liked me. He liked baby faces, but he knew me. He just knew he wanted to do what was right. He'd been involved with the promotion since the 1950s or 40s or something. Okay, well, you get to know the guy. The other guy, Pete Davies, he was a big fan of Wayne Gretzky. Don't know enough about him, and that's why he's brought on. But Ed Whalen, wrestling fan, controlled the show as far as the programming and the whatever. Okay. Had good interviews with him. He liked me. Those promos were lame, but they were sincere from a baby face. I still get stumbled over. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. Yeah, I got it right. Fumbled on the show, but he liked me. Okay, we jump ahead. Now we're on the road. Got all the things with the phony things to Meltzer's newsletter. And by the way, Dave Meltzer, talking to you directly, if I didn't say it before, how dumb could you be? You didn't have an editor then. As Hannibal said, you should have watched the TV shows. You should have watched the opponent's shows. All you had to do is watch the matches on TV. On TV. I saw it on TV. There are no 4.5 stars, 4.5 star matches, 2.5 star. There's no negative matches in Calgary wrestling. They said if you could make it there, inside the ring, outside the ring, you could make it anywhere. I've realized now it's the politics, but the in-ring product was a combination, a hybrid of lucha libre, Japan style, what they now call strong style. It was ahead of its time. There's no way any matches were 4.5, 2 stars. You should have been smarter. So don't put in your book 3 times or in an interview 3 times in a minute and a half, this idiot Beltzner. No. Now, here's where we go from here. We're on the road, Western Canada. The public the family turmoil came into play before we got there. Now it's escalated. You got Allison Hart, you got Diana Hart, you got Georgia Hart. Stu and Helen are keeping a safe face on what's going on, but they know. Owen going back and forth to Japan needs to know his own stipulation and what's happening to his brother Bruce, the oldest. Second oldest, Bruce being the youngest. You got Keith, Wayne, Owen, and another one I'm ready to bring up in the middle. You see everything going on. Everything's happening. And I'm looking there and going, shit, I got here. I was 23 years old. I don't need to, here's the cockiness part. I don't need to get in bed with the editor, with the newspaper editing room or whatever they call it, to know the editor of the newspaper. Stu Hart ran a damn show. That's not arrogance, that's reality. Okay, I'm listening to all this. I know there's heat from the Drumheller thing. No, Bruce, that's your father. Okay, we jump ahead. We're Western Canada. This shit's happening. Bruce is having Carl Moffat, God bless him, is drawing blood in towns of 200-300 people, cutting through 2 masks so you could see it. I'm looking at this and I'm knowing that this is everything that the family, about which the family is complaining. I'm still living with the British Bulldog and Diana Hart, Bret Hart's sister. I'm looking at this and going, how do I react to this? I'll just sit back and say nothing. We go on the road. Everything's on the road. Hashif Khan, Steve DeSalvo, Kerry Brown. And Steve DeSalvo, you're the best. But I learned a lot. I mean, he took me to a certain level, but Kerry Brown, you know, with Duke Wild, Duke, whatever his name was, great stuff. Point is, we get back. Now, the Hart family on the negative side, well, on the positive side, they are looking at me going, yeah, he's on our side, which I was. But I knew in high school, you don't snitch. You don't narc. You don't stooge on anybody. I went home. I'm just doing what I need to do. I'm picking up what I need to know. We come back into Calgary. This is before the trip to Montana. By the way, Bruce had people, Carl Moffat blading in 200 people spot shows in Saskatoon. Made no sense to me. Went against his parents' wishes, especially Ed Whalen. Okay, now we jump ahead. We're back. I'm looking at this situation like, what do? I'm too far along. I'm embedded to the British Bulldog and his wife, Diana Hart, that allowed me, Becky, to stay at his house and recuperate. I never met the guy before. He would have never let another man into his house with his wife. No matter what I looked like, it just wouldn't have worked. This was a family situation. Okay, they come back, and now I'm taking this all in of what's happening. Because I was never a big blading guy. I never bladed myself. I may look like crap, but I never bladed myself. All this stuff really, as a rookie, never made any sense to me. I went on with it. We get back, and all of a sudden, remember, I'm still living with Davey Boy Smith. I've already trained with the Dynamite Kid. Oh, to teach you down, headbutt, the top rope, anybody can do it, blah, blah, blah. It was invaluable training. You're shooting at the car. Is he shooting at us? Yeah, he's shooting at the car. Will he hit the gas tank? I didn't care. If he's blowing me up, he'll blow you up. Okay, everything's done. Now, all of a sudden, it escalates. We go on a trip to Montana, which is a big deal because it's outside the United States. Haver, Cut Bank, Great Falls. I got Kerry Brown on every night. They're already pissed off. The other side, is pissed off. We go down on this road trip. It's 12 hours from Calgary, at least, to Great Falls, and then you go about the territory. When we get down there, you're still with that? Are you still with me, Hannibal?
I am, yes.
Okay. It's going to go fast, but you need to know all this because it's been waiting 33 damn years. And here's it. I'm not being arrogant. It's just like I said years ago. Talk to me now because I won't remember it tomorrow. Okay, we go to down south. They're kayfabing me. You know what they're giving you the cold shoulder. They're kayfabing me. We go down to Montana. And Rebecca, you saw her picture earlier, gives me a call because she had a card, which she did in Minneapolis and did in Charlotte. Father had money. There's a calling card where you could call and then give a card so you don't have to pay the long distance rates. And she calls me and lets me know, Mr. Hart talked to me, and he said, if you don't mind yourself or something like that, if you don't be careful, they're going to have a blanket party with you. And I said back, and I was cocky and young, just as she said Brian Pillman was cocky and whatever she said. Yeah, I'm 20 now, maybe I'm 23 now. And I said to her, I says, you tell Mr. Hart, because at utmost respect, I never called him Stu. You tell Mr. Hart, you tell them, because she's warning me. She says, you tell them, or I said, you tell them that if they choose to have a blanket party with me, there's going to be at least 2, if not 3 name wrestlers that will have their throats pulled out. I don't know if that worked. I know that it didn't bother anything further. And I was sincere about it. We go down. I'm not a tough guy. I'm not claiming to be a tough guy. I'm just not going to be made an ass out of by the likes of Bruce Rosshart or any. And here we go. We go down south. They're kayfabing me. Haver, Cut Bank, Great Falls. If you ask me, because I'm eliminating your question ahead of time, Hannibal, what's the best match you ever had? Here's my story. We get down there. I'm on a 3-city run with Kerry Brown. I have the utmost respect for him. Oh my God. We go down. We're together. Marriage, whatever you want to call it. It's 30-second Broadways with real Broadway. The people in the audience are timing it. It ain't 30, it's only 18. No, it's right down to the wire. So if you get to the edge at 27, 28, 29, 30, the bell rings, the whole thing. Oh, he's not pinned. It's a Broadway. Okay. We go on the thing. They're kayfabing me the whole tour. It's just as bad as Eastern Canada going south to Montana. We go to the three towns. I'm in with Broadways with Kerry Brown. Okay, we go into 3 shows. It built. At one point, everyone's a 3-minute Broadway somewhere in there. And Jason the Terrible comes up to Bruce in front of me. How did you like that? The baby face threw the heel out of the ring. I did that on match night 2. After the Broadway didn't go my way, I threw the heel outside of the ring. It was wrong. Thank you, Carl Moffat. You corrected me. When he said in front of me on purpose, did you see it, Bruce? The baby face threw the heel out of the ring. Yeah, I did. Okay, Great Falls, 3rd act, 30-minute Broadway. We get through the thing. I give credit, may he rest in peace, to Owen Hart. Everybody kayfabing me, ignoring me in the van. Owen Hart comes to me, who headlined the show. And this isn't staging me up, it's to stage the story. And Owen Hart breaks kayfabe, comes to me and says, out of the blue, I'm not soliciting anybody's shit. I know what I'm doing now. He comes and he says, Brick, you had the best match on the card. I was shocked. I go, thank you, Owen. And he was in the main event. This was like a co-main event. Kerry Brown with a 30. Who the hell gives 30 minutes to somebody? It's not a man. It was up there, but a co-main. I go, thank you, Owen. I said, I got to tell. And I just broke my own kayfabe with their kayfabe and said, I appreciate you saying that. The guy that roomed with me. And I said, you know, here's what I got to say is at that last minute and a half, I felt during the Broadway. I mean, I know you told us everything to do. I'm waiting for the heel. They also said, Kerry Brown he was so excited with the audience reaction that he hadn't thrown a drop kick in 10 years. I'm like, yeah, no, his foot hit me right in the face. Point is, he was excited. We get through the whole thing. I said to Owen, well, wait a minute. At the last minute and a half, we went to the come-along. I think there should have been another come-along. I was watching, listening to the audience's response. I think there should have been, in the last 90 seconds, could have been anything. I don't care. Some other choke-along, come-along. You guys know what come-alongs are. Boston Crab or something before this, before the, Ken Patera thing to the slam down. And Owen looks and he goes, now you got it, Brick. Don't wait for the heel to say something. You're right. It would have kept the escalation of the crowd response according to in the last minute and a half. Well, I'll tell you what. And whoever commented, which I rarely see, Owen Hart was known for fucking with people. Yeah, he wasn't Sean Wood in fucking with me right now because this was sincere. I can tell you several stories. I shouldn't even be reading these. That's the first comment I read besides my daughter saying nothing earlier. Fuck this guy. Now I'm pulling a cornet. Fuck this guy. He never been in the ring. I'll tell you, David. But the point is this. Owen Hart was not, I'm glad I read it. Owen Hart wasn't fucking with me. He roomed with me because he looked out for his family business. So I don't need to hear you, pumpkin, commenting on what he did. It was a truth. It was the best match on the card. You asked Kerry Brown if he was still around. And yes, Owen Hart fucked with people. Some of the greatest stories I'll ever tell. And now I'm going to give one because this wasn't one of him fucking with me. And he didn't come up. And why would he say and belittle himself? You had the best match on the card when he was on the card. It was the damn best match on the card based on Wayne Hart's Calgary response of the audience meter, and Kerry Brown would say the same thing. That's all I'm going to say about that. However, Bruce Hart hasn't been fired yet, so I shouldn't even be watching this stuff under. But the fact is, thank you, Kerry Brown. That was wonderful, and that's the callback story to where he saw Meltzer's response of that newsletter 4-star match in Great Falls, where what's his name, Uncle Dave said, he didn't register or whatever he said, the 4-star match, blah, blah, blah. That thing happened. On my mother, father's, and brother's graves, Owen Hart said that. I would like your viewers, if anybody is there from Great Falls, you too, Meltzer, anybody's participation, and it was a pretty big show in Great Falls, if you could give personal response to that match, which was a 30-second Broadway, and Owen Hart came to me and said, that's the best match of the night. That's no rib, because that would be reflecting on him being on the show the same time. And guess what? Based on applause meter or anything, that was the best match on the card. Owen Hart didn't room with me to try to send false information to Meltzer's newsletter, which turned out, as I see now, yellow journalism. Meltzer, you should have had an editor, done something, at least had the wherewithal to contact my opponents, even looked at the damn programming on TSN Wrestling, Calgary, the country of Canada, and 17 foreign countries with the edit from TSN to the local station to say, if this Brick Bronski, Jeff Beltzner, was so bad, why would not you have edited out his programming? Why would you have not reported 4.5-star matches that were worthless? Makes no sense. You made the Stampede Wrestling organization look bad. Hannibal, you're right. And more so, Kerry Brown. God bless that guy. He may have fucked up my leg in Calgary, but I learned way more about wrestling from and working with him. Kerry Brown, whether he's the nephew of Bob Brown or not, he was wonderful. That's what happened right now. And we're not even into the story of the dressing room. So if we have to do a part 2, Hannibal, I want to get this story across to you of what finished in Calgary. But I do take umbrage with shit from Bruce, shit from Ross. Nobody else has shit. Wayne Hart, great guy. Oh my God. Ross Hart, great guy. And I haven't even brought up, and it ain't Keith, to the story of the ending of the brother that is the end of the story.
Yes, very, very detailed. Your daughter actually said she should have warned me about your side story habits. But we like the detail.
I want to tell you now, Hannibal, after getting to know you, I'm very protective, and so is she. I said earlier, you're closer to her age than I am. You have my blessing in taking her courtship, if not of marriage, but of just pursuing the thing. Because you're in for a handful. Raquel, not the other one she's spoken for, but she's a pisser, is all I'm going to say. Hi, Hannibal.
So can we get to the
yes.
That's what everyone's waiting for here.
I know they are. Now, where did we left off?
The stuff in Montana with Owen Hart and all the heat that happened there.
Okay, so you heard that Owen Hart he broke kayfabe. I was being kayfabed. On our 2 road trips, we came down. We're kayfabed. I am. And when we got down there, you got road trips. You're on a hotel room. I'll give Ross Hart credit. We're at some hotel room bar after one of the matches. And he offered me, and you should know about this. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Your Labatt's Blue back then, your Labatt's Blue beer, the Canadian content of alcohol was way bigger than here. And I like Labatt's Blue down here. Okay, we're on the same page, right?
Yes.
Okay. Ross Hart, we're in Montana, and I give Ross Hart credit. He reached across the aisle of the kayfabe. That's why I want to break this and get this over with. He reached over and gave me and I didn't drink then, a Labatt's Blue. And I was the prick heel, whatever you want to call it, and I wasn't a heel. And I says, no, Ross, I only drink with friends. I turned the beer down. Okay, now we're on the bus trip back. I'm in the babyface van. Got everybody in there. Bruce always sat in the front. He never drove. Somebody else drove. Got Jason, a terrible, next to me. I'm to the left. I'm in the sank and the second seat, and everybody's in the back. Okay. Now they all know they're kayfabing me because of the shit over the Eastern trip to Canada. Okay. What they were doing, Hannibal, this is an inside story. I'm going to cut to the chase quick because I know you want to know what's going on. Inquisitive minds want to know. Okay, we are going up. What they're doing, which is a unique story, all the boys at the babyface van are toasting each other. One person, again, the babyface van, toasting somebody. Oh, this guy can do this. This guy can do that. And he's praising me for this, that, and the other. Well, what the gimmick was, one would say what they did as an individual. Another person in the van would say, I'm accepting the award for what I've done. Now, these are phony awards. Pillman wasn't anybody then. Bruce, well, he was somebody then. Benoit, but he wasn't. He was Benoit. He wasn't where he was. You got Jonathan Holliday in the back. You got me, Brick Bronski. Nobody knew any of us because the babyface van was not the heel van with Bad News Allen, with Champagne Jerry Morrow, Gama Singh, all those names, Mr. Hito, Kerry Brown, Steve DeSalvo. That was another van. Okay. Now I'm still being kayfabed. I can read my lips, but I'm not hearing me.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay. Well, we're in Montana. And the same thing is going on with the kayfabe. We get down there. I told you the story about the bar, whatever bar it was in Montana. And I said to Ross Hart, I only drink with friends. Okay, so I ignored the kayfabe. We're getting up above the Montana border, and we go into Alberta. We get up. as we get up to the whole thing, you're still with me, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, you keep calling me sir. I told you, Jeffrey, don't call me sir. I'm enlisted just like you. Okay, I got you laughing. Okay, here's the end of the story.
Yeah. Your daughter is also here. She wants to know about the marriage talk, but we won't get into that. I won't distract you.
My daughter's being intrusive right now and interloping. She needs to shut her mouth and get off this interview until later. She can date you later. You're closer to her age than mine. I approve of the marriage. Will everybody leave this go away? Okay. Now we go up past Montana. As we go up, that's where, and I swear to God, on my mother, brothers, and father's graves, Great Falls, Montana. And if you ask me what my best match was, it was with Kerry Brown, him carrying it. Great Falls, Montana was a legitimate 13-minute Broadway. The day or two after, Carl the Moffat Terrible, oh, did you see the baby face throwing the heel out of the ring? Well, you didn't that night. This was on, and I told you earlier about telling, Owen came to me, God bless him, to say, after everybody kayfabing me, he comes to me and he says, well, you know, you had the best match on the card, and he's giving me critique. I says, I think I should have threw in another come along. He goes, you're right. You got it. You got it. You got it. He was looking for his parents' best interests of the business. I respect that. Okay, now we head north. The last story before we get to the fight in the dressing room is the people in the van, in the babyface van. What they were doing, Hannibal, is they would give toasts to people in the van. We're all sitting there, babyface van, they're giving toasts. Somebody would say, did you hear about, and one of them would extol the virtues about another. From Pillman sparring with Mike Tyson to the tennis guy, and everything. It was outlandish praise. They went through the whole thing. It all came back. And when they said it to me, I banged the roof. And I says, what do you think? Because they're they're feigning font praise on people. It ain't real. They're feigning praise. Feigning praise. I'm listening to this going, you're just making an ass out of the system. So I'm on the way back from Canada, from
Montana.
Montana, thank you. And we get up there. I did the thing with Bruce. I remember going up there, and Holiday, I'll give him credit, Jonathan Holiday spoke from the back, and he said, you know, we give this guy a hard time. I was given heat from this whole shit, and I just took it. I'm thinking, I'll wait till I get back to talking. I'll wait. I'll talk to the teacher. Yeah, I waited, and I give Holiday credit. He said, you know, we give this guy hassle, but I was with him in Charlotte. He's every big as Lex Luger. He's way more talented. You guys give him a hard time, but he's the biggest thing. He's bigger than Hulk Hogan. This is bigger than anything you guys are talking about. Thank you, Jonathan Holiday, wherever you are. Thank you. Because he did it. He was in the back of the van, because wrestlers in the back of the van weren't, no offense. He did what he needed to do. I took it in, and I appreciate it, because I went to the territory with him, and he said that. And I will say this. When he gave the toast in the back, Jason the Terrible, Carl Moffat, sitting next to me. He looked at me and did this and handed me a beer. And I looked at him. It was sincere from both of them. It was too far gone. I was already in bed with the Harts, and my answer was, and they're asking for a response. They're giving me a toast. And I said, no matter what they say, all I can say is, Mr. Stu Hart will not appreciate the way you strike the hood of his van repeatedly the way you do with those bangs. And I wouldn't appreciate, I don't think Stu Hart would appreciate you banging the roof of his van. I looked over and everybody had just a dumbfounded, agape look of an open face to say, oh my God. It's the way I felt at the time. It wasn't the right answer. These guys reached out to me. Holiday, Carl Moffat. I love this guy. If he's still around, he came up with the chops and fucked with me, according to Bruce Hart. I chopped him back. Oh, it's a chop. And then it went away. That I respect to everything that happened. But by the time we got back to the territory, and I could have, from Bruce Hart's, Stu Hart, Ross Hart's, that blue shit, that brass ale, that damn beer, and this over here and everything. I'll tell you what, they made every effort, from Bruce Moffat to the Labatt's Blue to Ross Hart saying, have a beer, I only drink with friends. They made every effort, but I was already stuck in the mud. And then I can end with the rest of the story. Please tell me, and then I can move on, because we can do a part 2, Hannibal, but that's where we are right now.
I think we'll have to get the rest of your career in a part 2, but do you want to tell the actual incident with Pillman to not leave the fans hanging?
Yeah, I won't do that because that's not fair. Here's what happened. We come, I don't want to stand, everything's out of sequence here. Look, and this is the part I wanted to get by. It's a long build-up. There's a long more. Thank you for the part 2. You are the best, Hannibal. I really appreciate that and what you're doing. Here's what happened. We get back from the Montana thing. Another great shot that makes me look like shit. Okay, we get back. We go in. I'm living with Dynamite Smith. I got the training with the Dynamite Kid. The both of them are in cahoots. They're cousins. Hannibal, I've never struck a person first in my life. I've been in a lot of fights. I'm not, gotta watch what I say. I'm not one of these. I worked as a bouncer when I was 18, wasn't old enough to be 21 to be in there. I haven't been knocked out by beer bottles, wine bottles, or whatever. I slapped by Pillman. I slapped him in the face. I didn't punch him. It's the first time I instigated a fight. Let's go back to that. We're in Calgary. I could carry myself. I'm not extolling myself as a tough guy or anything. I'm not. That's not for other people to decide.
Damn it, you froze again.
Yeah, I got there. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we could hear you, but you freeze in the funniest poses.
I got our technology coming, Hannibal.
Okay.
Now, while we're off camera, you're Devin Nicholson. Are you any related to Jack Nicholson? But
oh, we're on. We're still live, by the way.
We're still on. Okay.
It's just you're frozen. And,
we can do a part 2, but I'm going to tell you right now. Because this, to me, is exciting because when Brian Pillman died in 97, God bless him, he was wonderful. We were pawns in the same situation. Can you still hear us?
I can still hear you perfectly. It's just your picture's frozen, and I understand the pawn.
At least it looks better than the picture before.
If I may intrude here, I apologize, Devin, for you. You're doing an incredible job, both of you gentlemen, because of the freezing up, and you've gone over 3 hours.
Yeah, we could just end it here, but let's. Do you want to say something about the mask mutilator before we close up for a second, just to give it a plug where people can watch it, as you're the big star of it, and this was the main reason we were doing this interview, so you can plug that.
This is Dale Schneck, the producer and co-writer. Brick is laughing only because I think he's modest. He was both the director and the star, and I noticed as I was watching it, your podcast now on my television in my family room. A lot of people are asking questions and making comments about his trauma movies and Mass Mutilator. So, with your indulgence, Devin, if we could maybe postpone that because you've given so much time that it's incredible, and you have a following that obviously is so loyal. So I just think both of you guys need a break. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're correct there.
Devin, if I may say, are you any relation to Jack Nicholson? No, but I'll tell you right. I approve of the marriage between my daughter and you, because that damn that little bitch was commenting the whole time. I approve of the marriage between Raquel Beltzner and Devin Nicholson. When can we pick this up? Because you know there's more here in goodies.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. We can end this now for the fans. I'm going to go offline now for the fans. Thank you for everyone that tuned in, and we'll get to the end of that Pillman story another time. So I appreciate it, fans.
Now, when you say get off the line, can I talk